Good morning, and welcome to our workshop. Really looking forward for the entire morning. We'll have nice things prepared for you. So this is a workshop for the early career researchers, see how we could boost digital government and interoperability with really fresh ideas, what is currently going on in research, and we really want to see where this is all taking us. So I'm really looking forward to have this workshop today for until 4 hours, more or less, until lunchtime. My name is Sven Schade. I'm working for the Commission, for the Joint Research Center, which is the in-house scientific service. But this workshop is co-organized with the Belgian Presidency, and we have Reinhard there, and also with the Interoperable Europe Academy, and you will have Alina here, and you will see her later. And there's also my colleague Paula from the JRC, and we prepared quite a program for you. So I'm really looking forward to have this workshop, because there has been some tradition in SEMIC to also support early career researchers and having sessions for early career researchers. I was a bit sad last year because it didn't happen in Madrid, but now we start again, and we don't even have a session, but we have a full workshop for 4 hours, so that's fantastic. And we really want to see what's actually happening in research, and I think we got a quite interesting program together, and we're actually preparing also a book of abstracts that will be published just after. So we really have quite a rich set of speakers you will see today, and a rich set of topics ranging from more the cultural aspects, more the integrated work on platforms, but also the classical SEMIC topics on data models and semantic interoperability. So I hope you will enjoy it. We have quite a packed agenda, quite a full agenda. But what we will do is we'll have 3 different panels. So we will have one panel just after I finished, and we'll basically start diving into some of these topics of early career researchers. We have a second panel doing pretty much the same. And then we have Georgia and Evelyn with us to actually also give some feedback or questions after the interventions. And of course, we also have time for questions from the audience. Then we have a coffee break. And after the coffee break, we invert the logic. So you will actually hear from Georgia and Evelyn what they are doing, and then it's your time to ask questions. No? So basically, we'll have the early career researchers on stage first to be also a bit questions, but then we also have the inverted logic after the coffee break. And then we'll close with, I think Reinhard, you said it's a popcorn closing session, so we'll just have a way of giving everybody a chance to give some final statements. So that's how we organize the next 4 hours. I assume people will join throughout, so don't get disturbed if people find their way, and we still have some space left, so that's good. One more thing I wanted to let you know, and therefore I think I would need the next slide. We prepared a Slido because there is streaming also for the session. So what we actually want to do should be one more. There it is. So actually, for the Slido, we would use Slidos throughout the entire workshop to basically allow everybody to post questions at all time. So we will have the possibility to get the questions in, and there will be a voting later on. Perfect, thank you. So you can just scan the QR code, also for colleagues online, and then basically ask questions throughout. There is a possibility to vote the questions, and then we'll go into the most voted questions. We'll see how it works. If there are any technical issues, we of course improvise, and we can always use microphones and go through the room if this is easier. I think that's all I wanted to say for now. And with this, I would already hand over to the first panel, and this will be moderated by Alina, our colleague. She is a seconded national expert at Digit and the unit for interoperability and digital government, and they're mainly actually responsible for the Interoperable Europe Academy, so also looking into skills and competence building, and who could be better to moderate the first panel. So thank you very much. Alina, over to you, and here we go. Enjoy the sessions.
Thank you, Sven, for this warm welcome. Thank you, everybody, for this first panel. We are very excited to be here. I would like to invite our first 3 panelists. Well, not first 3, because we're not keeping track of our record of tops. It's just the members of the first panel, please. Gloria, Eric, and Alessandra, please, if you could join us on stage so that we can begin our panel. Now, while they get situated, Gloria is a PhD scholar in Roma Tre University, and her presentation and her research revolves around blockchain waste management for smart villages, an Italian case study. That sounds difficult. So we are looking forward to your 5-minute presentation. Now, I will also remind you the house rules. The 5-minute presentation is important to keep time span. Here is here to ensure that we all do. So over to you, Gloria, for the first presentation.
So we'll have the presentation on screen, right? So first of all, very nice to meet you. Thank you for having me here. I'm very happy to be here today. I'm Gloria. I'm a PhD candidate from Roma Tre University on my last year of studies, and my research project is actually and my research project is actually based on a research on waste management in smart villages in Italy. And the research topic has been chosen because Italy is one of the countries which has the largest number of small villages, which cover about 60% of the Italian municipalities. So in a sustainability framework, we are trying to find out if waste management, which is, as we all know, one of the main issues in sustainability, might be handled by new technologies in order to improve and promote circular economy in smart villages in Italy, in order to create smart villages from small villages. So today my presentation is actually on a quantitative study. We applied a TAM2 methodology by Venkatesh and Davis. Yes, thank you. Since...
If you want, okay.
Oh, okay, that's for me. Thank you very much. Lucky to be the first.
Thanks.
Okay, so since waste management is one of the critical elements of bioeconomy, and it is also one of the elements that makes it possible for us to create new circular economies, and since waste management processes are now one of the main topics of the international policies and the national policies in Italy, such as the National Waste Management Program in Italy, and also the National Recovery and Resilience Program in Italy, which are based on the European Green Deal, we found out that one of the main issues found out in blockchain waste management is the study of the life cycle of waste. So what happens is that waste is collected in one municipality, and then it has to be treated and then transported to landfills. Yet it is difficult to monitor and trace the life cycle of waste from the collection to the disposal and to the landfilling, which, as we all know, is also very polluting. So about 30% of waste, which is collected in municipalities in Italy, is then transported to other sites and to other landfills. Which makes it difficult also to control how the waste is treated, if it is actually compliant with the European and the national policies and directives. So our policies in Italy, such as the PNRR, are now promoting and asking for a nationwide program of monitoring of waste. And that's where we find that blockchain might have an impact, since blockchain is a as we know here, it is a digital ledger where data can be stored and registered safely and transparently. So our study was based on 360 municipalities in Italy when we were talking to waste managers in order to find out what is the perceived ease of use of blockchain technology, and therefore what is their will to apply such technologies, or what is their resistance to change and resistance to apply new technologies in waste management in order to monitor and trace waste. So we applied a statistical analysis after submitting a brief questionnaire through Eurosurvey to Italian managers. And what we found out is actually some first findings which are not that positive on blockchain technology, as we expected, of course. So first of all, the value perception of blockchain technology is not that high because, and that is due to the scarce knowledge of the technology. We've also found out, and maybe I will go in depth later if I have any questions, but we also found out that the top managers are the ones that are choosing to apply blockchain technology, and they are not willing to apply it because of course, of the scarce knowledge. There is a lack of competencies in blockchain technology. That's why it is they are more favorable to maintain the current systems in managing waste. But also, since we are talking about interoperability, there is an issue with the systems that are currently used, which is the basic systems, and the application of new technologies such as blockchain technology. And it would be very much easier through the application of, yes, trainings, but also to create some sort of communication between blockchain technology, which is the new technology, and the old technologies applied to implement blockchain in waste management. Okay, so I am actually open to questions. I had only 1 minute left, so thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gloria, for your presentation. And now, just to situate our research better, as Sven explained, we will pass the floor to our experts who might have questions to better understand the perimeter of your research. Yes, please.
Okay. I think I can use the microphone. Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot. First of all, I'm Italian, so that I'm quite actually also curious to know who responded to your questionnaire from the small village. At least one example. Probably I can recognize some municipalities. Actually, I have many. I would say that I have many questions about blockchain, because blockchain, we know, was built for specific purpose in specific domains, like the financial one, right? And we change completely the scenario here. So you said a few things that caught my attention. One is transparently in blockchain, and the other one is interoperability, which is another keyword of this workshop. So, and this event in general. So I would like to understand a little bit better, why do you think blockchain can bring more transparent in this process that you mentioned and the life cycle of waste management? And if you believe, if currently with the implementation of the blockchain paradigm, let's say, if it is really interoperable, and we can definitely think to interoperable solution also in other domains. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. Okay, so one of the municipalities is Cervara di Roma. So a really nice municipality in Lazio and in Rome. Anyway, As for blockchain technology, yes, I use the term transparency. We are actually, as we know, blockchain can be declined in many ways according to the systems that we are using when developing the governance framework of the blockchain. So blockchain is known for transparency, especially when we are talking about a public blockchain. Then the data can be shared with selected parts from the network, taking part in the network of blockchain. And the data is shared with all the stakeholders part of the blockchain, so that's why it can be called transparent. But also the data is modifiable, but all the modifications are registered also in a transparent way. We are also developing actually a study on which is the right governance for blockchain in the case of circular economy, because as we all know, blockchain is not the most sustainable technology. It consumes quite a lot of energy. So we are finding the right compromise between transparency and the application to circular economy, but also sustainability. What else? Interoperability.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, as for interoperability, yes, I really think that blockchain can be a technology that is interoperable, where we create different systems. We saw that in different applications, such as the micro-credentials for the universities, where we created a connection between universities. There are also applications in connection with IoT. As for waste management, there are some case studies already existent, such as the one in Brazil, where they are using green coins to promote sustainability. Basically, the citizens are incentivized to collect waste in a sustainable manner. And then they collect these green coins where they can then use it in the real world, so they can access to some public services, have discounts, and so on and so forth. So there are already some cases apart from the financial applications. So I'm quite positive on that, but still we are finding some resistance to change. So that is something that we have to work on.
Oh, we still have 2 minutes for a very short question, if someone has it. So if it's in the audience, no, but for the questions the questions from the audience are going to be at the end of the session for everybody. So we were taking questions for the perimeter of the research, just to be faithful to the exercise. Okay.
But maybe
You'll have your time.
I might have one question.
Yes.
So I'm very interested in, so I'm Evelyn Vlasserot. I'm working for the University of Ghent, but also working at Flemish government, so having a part-time job. I have a lot of experience also in the TAM research model. And I've also done a study in the past, so I'm very interested in that. And in particular, you mentioned that you targeted Italian managers for your research. So, and you say, okay, they don't see this blockchain technology as accepted, or they don't accept it that much. Do you think that, my question is already very suggestive, but do you think that with this target of this kind of users, because you see these Italian managers as the users of the blockchain technology, do you think that that decision also scoped a bit the results of your research?
Yes, okay, of course, but very nice question. Thank you. But yes, I think that, of course, it influences the results of our research, because managers are quite keen to remain in what they already know. That's why that's why we targeted the managers, because this is the beginning of our wider research, where we will try together with a company that is providing blockchain services to actually apply blockchain in waste management, where there is already a platform which is functioning, and try and understand if this can have a positive impact on sustainability, but also a positive impact on the job, so the job relevance, for the managers. So
okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for keeping the time so neatly. Now, over to Eric. Maybe we should go to the next slide. He comes from the Tallinn University, Taltech in Estonia. He's a fourth-year PhD, and his research revolves around building smart living environment for aging societies, decision support for cross-border e-services between Estonia and Finland.
Yes.
It's long.
Great. I know it is. I'm sorry for that. Thank you very much. Yes. So to start this presentation, a little background. So this paper focuses on population aging, and it's having a lot of acute effects in Estonia and Finland. So there's a higher proportion of older people that are living alone, living in rural areas compared to the average in Europe. And you're also seeing consequences of population aging in terms of the labor market, healthcare provision, public healthcare expenditure, and a lot of other ramifications. Now, the European Commission recognizes that ICTs, e-services, and products can be leveraged to alleviate some of this pressure for the public sector. And this leads into the concept of age-friendly smart living environments. So these are physical spaces that can be IoT-enabled, ICT integrated, and can provide kind of a convenient point to access e-services, including cross-border ones, for older people. And this is also promoted by the United Nations Decade of Healthy Aging as well. And if we look at it from a cross-border perspective, so Estonia and Finland have really high cross-border mobility. There's a large proportion of Estonian people living in Finland and vice versa. And if we talk about interoperability, so both countries use the X-Road data exchange layer on a national level. So they're two separate instances nationally. However, they also have cross-border data exchange capability through the X-Road. So the Estonian-Finnish population registries, the business registries, and the tax authorities are all exchanging cross-border data. And there's kind of a political will to increase these cross-border use cases. And this paper was looking to see how these use cases could be increased in the context of age-friendly, smart living environments. So this led to a few research questions. So the first one is, what factors are inhibiting the provision of cross-border e-services between Estonia and Finland in this age-friendly smart living environments context? What types of cross-border e-services between Estonia and Finland have been identified as needed the most? And lastly, how can interoperable cross-border e-services and age-friendly SLEs be established in Estonia and Finland? So we used a methodological combination of cognitive mapping and decision-making evaluation trial laboratory. It's very long, sorry about that. But we had basically two panelists from Estonia and Finland, and these panelists consisted of civil society representatives, public sector, industry, and academia. And we call this kind of this quadruple helix approach to our data collection. And some of the main results. So this article was published in a journal, Technology and Society. It's quite long, so I kind of highlighted the kind of interesting bits. Some of this isn't very novel, and you would think this is kind of self-explanatory, but there are some interesting results. So number one, older people. So the European Commission defines older people as over the age of 50. We can debate who is an older person. That's another question. There's also framing called the silver economy, so it's products and services targeted to those over the age of 50. We can debate that another time. However, generally older people are biased against and have distrust of technology, which hampers the potential for cross-border e-service delivery. And this was in both Estonia and Finland, this distrust. In the Estonian case, there's a lack of high-speed broadband internet access. And Estonia is a very internet-accessible country. However, the cost of really good quality internet is very high. And for older people who in Estonia have some of the lowest pension levels in Europe, this is a really challenge for them to kind of get connected in terms of internet accessibility. In both sides, organizations really lack the knowledge about the needs of older people, the types of e-services required, and then therefore the necessary data and reference architectures to provide these services. And from Finland specifically, there was really a lack of organizational interest and insufficient funding for kind of the creating of cross-border e-services. However, what we did with the panel was we tried to elicit at least 7 intervention areas for potential cross-border e-service implementation. So some of these were in mobility, healthcare, caregiving was a main concern. We also had lifelong education. So for older people needing to reskill and upskill, Open University at Tallinn University of Technology has some training programs, so we were thinking about kind of making this more on a cross-border level than just Estonia internally. And it was also mentioned this kind of cross-border proactive event-driven public services would be pretty ideal and optimal for older people, so they don't have to, physically go to some type of service point. And we also had a few recommendations. So one of the recommendations, just really quickly, was to have kind of stakeholder workshops from Estonia and Finland who are, have this cross-border objective, and to have these workshops in each identified intervention area. Really quickly, the future outlook. So SLEs have really high cross-sectoral characteristics. I think an interesting upcoming component is that the X-Road has a roadmap to be compatible with data spaces. So this could be kind of an entry point for SLE service providers. I mean, as we all know, cross-border interoperability has this kind of inherent complexity, especially when you go to this national level. And from kind of the results, this tends to lean towards issues with organizational collaboration, coordination over technical challenges, as there already is robust interoperability infrastructure in Estonia and Finland. It's a question of leveraging and scaling that to other use cases that potentially go beyond just government to government. Really quickly, so Estonia and Finland also have a very positive political and cultural relationship, and this enables cross-border coordination than usual. And this has all been kind of anchored to this X-Road data intermediary trust architecture. Yeah, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm addressing our expert panels, Georgia, Evelyn, Sven. If one of you has a couple of questions for Eric.
I can start? Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, always.
Maybe we should also,
yes.
if it's possible, to.
Yes, madam. Actually, if you go forward, I think I had a couple extra slides in there. I tried to, yeah, there we go. Yeah, these are.
I was looking for the Slido.
The Slido, okay.
Going on.
Anyway,
yeah,
all good.
Indeed,
yeah.
I saw some slides that probably
just in case, just in case.
Yeah, because you mentioned, first of all, I always so interested in which way actually Finland and Estonia are so able to communicate with each other, and all the other countries in Europe have all these difficulties, especially when we apply, for example, the single digital gateway regulation, where there is this cross-border stuff. But anyway, yeah, that it was quite interesting because you mentioned the fact that you need high-speed broadband. So infrastructures. Okay?
Yes.
And I know that, for example, Estonia has started this digital transformation starting from infrastructure. So I was just wondering whether these people, all the age people, that's definitely not from 50, I would say.
Yeah, not my definition, by the way.
No, okay, not mine as well. No, I'm just wondering whether which is the sample that you have chosen. If are people living alone, for example, or if they are in some structures like that provide that. That probably also the broadband part is not available if you are an old person, you don't believe in these technologies, and so
it's kind of a convergence of demographic and geographical factors. So older people in Estonia and Finland tend to live alone, and they tend to live outside of cities, kind of disproportionately to the European average. And the Estonian government had kind of this rural broadband access infrastructure development plan. However, it basically failed, and it was too expensive in the end. Even with the infrastructure, the investment that they made, older people still had to pay quite a lot of euros, which maybe relatively isn't a lot, but as I said, the average Estonian pensioner it's very low. I think it's one of the lowest in the European Union. So it's kind of this convergence of factors that have inhibited this broadband access to rural areas, and it's quite expensive to, get the fiber optic cable over to some, one individual, right, who maybe doesn't really care about the internet to begin with. This was just mentioned in the panel that we had with both Estonia and Finnish stakeholders. I think it's not maybe the most important factor. So in this methodology, what we actually do is from the cognitive mapping, the panelists voted on the most prioritized factors. So they voted on the 5 factors that they think were the priority barriers to implementation. And then we ran a statistical equation where each panelist decided which factor of the 5 impacts the other factors the most. So this broadband high-speed accessibility was kind of one of the lower prioritizations, but it did make the top 5 challenges and barriers. I think it's more about this kind of organizational awareness of older people needs. It's not, for lack of a better, it's not a really sexy market, right? But what we have to understand is the future is going to be this top-heavy population pyramid, all over the world. So it was kind of like, how can we prepare for this now, so in the future we're not kind of playing catch-up? That was a bit of the premise.
Just a very quick other question about the e-services that you were thinking about.
Yes.
Which type of e-services do you think are definitely for cross-border?
So I don't know if okay, all good. Sorry, no worries. I shouldn't have put them on there. I think there were basically 3. One was caregiving was a huge issue for both Estonians and Finland, and for the contact persons of older people are generally the ones actually doing the cross-border e-service or the service provision. So mobility was one of them. So having some simplified mobility platform or service between Estonia and Finland. So there's a ferry that goes there, but it's tough for older people to get those logistics. There's a lot of moving parts. So that was one e-service. Another one was this open university upskilling, reskilling potential, because you could leverage EID usage for that, and both Finland and Estonia have a bit higher EID. Estonia's penetration rate very high, it's almost 98%, but Finland's a bit lower. I don't want to guess on that, but I want to say around 50%. But however, you could leverage that infrastructure for kind of these micro credentials from Open University. So yes, mobility and caregiving was also one, but that's a bit more complex. The panelists said like having a one-stop shop for ordering caregiving in Estonia and Finland would be, very helpful, but this would also require a lot of private-public partnership. And that was also kind of a main outcome of the services, is that the public sector was actually viewed not as important in the service provision ecosystem as the private sector, but there still has to be some, public sector connection there. And that was, I think, kind of an interesting outcome, this emphasis on PPPs. Yep.
Thank you, Eric, for the answer.
Absolutely.
We have time for a second question.
Okay.
Please.
So I have maybe very interesting research again.
Yes.
I have two questions regarding to the barriers you mentioned.
Yes.
I found it very interesting that you say the lack of organizational interest, and I was hoping you could maybe tell something more about it.
Yeah, so I think this goes to business models. So the business model of making money off products, services for older people is kind of in its infancy. So you, like I said before, it's not the super sexiest market to target, but that's kind of a lack of foresight as this will continue to grow in the future. So right now it was more about bottom line, and that bottom line, that business model hasn't been kind of fully fleshed out on a general scale, and therefore organizations who are more private sector driven they're not really trying to be proactive and create space for this target market. The public sector is a bit different, so they have a responsibility to look after the welfare of their citizens, so they have a bit more awareness, but then comes this kind of barrier, a lack of awareness what do Finnish older people, what are their needs and preferences compared to Estonian people. So there's kind of this silo of Estonian government, if they want to build these cross-border services, don't really have a profile of Finnish needs, even though they're very culturally linked. They still have nuances, and I think those haven't been captured on a public sector level. If that, kind of goes a bit deeper. Yeah.
Interesting. I hope to see also some recommendations or things on how to get this organizational interest.
Yep.
And then my second question gets also into one of the barriers, and that is I'm very interested in the things you say that you want to address the distrust and also the lack of digital skills. Do you have any strategies that you have identified to get this uptake?
Not too. I think the main one was leveraging this open university, and if you want to kind of upskill digital literacy. So I should mention one kind of government idea. This was implemented, I think, in the early 2000s, was basically the Estonian government created this program called Look at the World, which trained about 100,000 older citizens to be more, digitally familiar with a computer, a keyboard. That was at that time, in the early 2000s. But that happened in 2001, and there was also a program in 1996, but there hasn't been a new one since 2001. So I think from the Estonian government side, there should be more impetus to create these kind of mass-scale training programs, and they kind of leverage different high schools, and every high school back then actually had a computer and computer rooms in the early 2000s, which was kind of a new thing. But yeah, in the past 20 years, we haven't had this kind of mass digital upskill, digital literacy movement. It's, I think, mainly a prioritization type of thing right now. Estonia is going through, as you know, the war in Ukraine. The economy is very difficult. It's kind of been at the bottom, I guess, of the priority list. But yeah, the 90s and the early 2000s, there were mass scale digital upskill trainings called Tiger Leap and this Look at the World. But there hasn't been much since. And I would say that it's already been done. It could be replicated, but in this kind of new technological paradigm that we have currently. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Now, I remind the audience that you can go to Slido and post your questions that we will address after the entire panel. Just let's keep the rules of the game in place. And
thank you.
Give over the mic to Alessandro. Who is from the Lisbon Council for Economic Competitiveness. He's an early researcher. Okay.
Sorry, just playing around.
Yes, reorganization. We shuffle things. And his research is on the is this it?
Yes.
Okay. Interoperability governance. I'm sorry, I have something else written. Interoperability governance of technology products and services in the field of emergency management.
Yeah, I tried to give a catchy title, so I called it SOS Emergency Services. So The research or the study that I'm presenting is part of a Horizon Europe project. I won't get into the details of it, but this project aims to enhance cross-border interoperability and cross-border emergency services. This has two main goals. One is to enhance the ecosystem, so the possibility that different emergency services providers can procure different services, different components of the service from different countries. And the other one is, unfortunately, the fact that natural disasters don't see borders. So you may have a situation where, and in fact there are already situations where you need different countries with different systems to interoperate to save lives, pretty much. So the specific target is the interoperability governance of technology products and services in the field of emergency management. I will cut right to the chase. We see that interoperability governance is collaborative governance, which is sort of self-explanatory when it comes to governance, but is particularly highlighted when it comes to the governance of interoperability of products, services, and technologies, as this usually entails both the political, strategic, technical, and operational governance that are most of the time not carried out by a single organization, even when it comes to national governments that technically have the scale and the size to do so. When we add to this the fact that we are looking specifically at emergency services, we see that there is quite a lack of cohesiveness in the sense that emergency services are not necessarily considered within the main frameworks of interoperability governance in public services. And this, of course, makes it more complicated to coordinate the interoperability in this case. And in particular, we see that the political and strategic aspects are the most important ones. We also developed some recommendations. This is still very much in progress. I have a slide at the end where we'll see the next steps. But the recommendations that we put forward so far and that we are looking to validate are highlight the role of interoperability in emergency services in the institutions and organizations that are more adapt to that, like the ERCC. Leadership, so perhaps appoint a CEO at the ERCC, which is the Emergency Response Coordination Center of the European Union. In general, recognize the importance of some given positions at the top to bring forward an agenda on interoperability. Ensure a seat at the table, so ensure that organizations that are in charge of emergency services and the governance of them are also participating to the discussions on the governance of interoperability in public services. Make it specific, so develop a specific interoperability framework for emergency services. We know that with the Interoperable Europe Act, there are actions in this sense, and there is it's foreseen that there are specific interoperability frameworks developed, so we very much encourage this. Who is who? So it may seem obvious, but it's important to identify who is the most adequate actor to implement interoperability in emergency services. And this is not so easy because of the complexity of this environment, even more so if we go cross-border. And streamline it, so empower and make accountable these actors to make sure that the interoperability policy is downstreamed until the local level, because we see that emergency services have a national coordination, but are then downstreamed towards the local level. So it's important that interoperability policy follows this, and it's not, okay. So these are the conclusions of this presentation. meaning that what are the next steps? We are seeking to validate the findings and the recommendations. Within the project, we will open this process to various stakeholders, but I am keen on doing this here already. Monitor, so follow the implementation of the Interoperable Europe Act, which we see, of course, as an enabler, even though it has to be used in the right setting, I would say. Dive deeper into soft governance to enrich these recommendations, which are quite level at this point, and fine-tune, so promote a final set of recommendations after this. So this was the end, and okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Alessandra. Over to the expert panel for questions. And don't forget to post your questions so that we can have a discussion, all of us, after the panel. Thank you.
Yeah, I have two questions actually. The first one, in the last slide, you put soft between quotes. What do you mean precisely with soft? Because it seems from the previous slides that instead you are requiring a strong governance, because I would say that in cases of emergency with this disaster, yeah, I mean, everything should work, and who is who, and every actor has a specific role. It should really mean a strong governance, especially thinking, for example, to my country, where these regional stuff, you know, and the national one, I think that the cooperation should be really strong, you know. So, but you put these quotes, so I was caught by that. So if you can elaborate on that, and the second one, and then I do everything together. Is you said that we need to create a specific interoperability framework for these specific services. Do you have already in mind something about that? So some kind of framework? Are you thinking about all the possible layers of the interoperability, from legal, organizational, semantic, and technical? Or I don't know if you have ideas on that.
On the first part of the question, I have two angles to it. The first one is that actually one of the regions that participates in this project, which is called TEMA, by the way, is the region Sardinia. So they are part of this study. Luckily for us, the governance of interoperability maturity is quite high in Sardinia. We use the quick assessment tool that is provided by the Commission to assess that. However, we see that, so for the soft part, you're right, but I think that in this sense, when it comes to interoperability governance in this context, there's still a need for soft measures that enable a minimum level of interoperability at which everyone must operate. So here it comes the strong part. But that there's still a need for softer measures to make sure that we can achieve the stronger ones. And when it comes to emergency services per se, this is a little bit out of scope from this study, meaning that this looks specifically at the solution, services, products, and so on. Second part was the framework. At this point, not really, meaning we don't have specific ideas in mind. I can say that from consultations with some stakeholders, including the region of Sardinia, but also the Red Cross in Germany, we see that there is actually a strong need for the legal aspect of interoperability. This seems to come up all the time, I would say, even in other projects, like just in the brackets, that one would think, that there are enough enablers. I think it's a mix in between the Interoperable Europe Act just being approved and so like not being really known by a lot of stakeholders, and and also the fact that there's still, like for the GDPR maybe, still like a little bit of a barrier between a gap between what the policy wants to achieve and what the lawyer think, or playing safe.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Alessandro, for this presentation. I want to go further upon the question that Georgia also asked about the interoperability framework, or what you have in mind, but also how will you engage, or do you have strategies in mind in how you will be engaging all these kind of stakeholders? Because you mentioned having a seat at the table is very important, but also here in Flanders and at our interfederal level, we find it sometimes very hard to engage all these different stakeholders to work together on this kind of topic like emergency management. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah. First of all, even in our little experience, this was very difficult. Obviously, the first and most common answer is we don't have time, we don't have a person that can take care of that. So sure, one recommendation is going to be that to devote more resources to that. That's quite easy in a way. But yeah, otherwise, I would say we have a twofold strategy maybe. One is to make use of this consortium that we have with the Horizon Europe project and really try to do the most that we can. This is also a 4-year project, by the way, and we are just at month 18. So there's still quite some time to push hard on this topic. Another let's say part of the strategy is hoping to get enough support from this kind of context and group of stakeholders to try to make sure that both sides are aligned and both sides, say, meet at the middle on how this kind of engagement it can be done. We, meaning my organization, as for our role in the project, we of course will also try to make the most of this position, but obviously that's not sustainable in the long run, so that's just for the moment, kind of like as a catalyst. Maybe just one small thing on the specific interoperability framework. A part of the project is to use the context broker to enable interoperability, semantic interoperability on the data layer. Off the record, honestly, I thought that this was already something in the emergency services. I was quite surprised when I saw that there was nothing. So that's definitely something that's, let's say, low-hanging fruit, maybe.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can now dive into the questions that were asked on Slido. And the way we're going to go about it is each and every one of us is going to vote for the question they like most, and then we are going to answer them with the remaining time according to what our favorites are. That way the majority wins and we don't upset anybody. So if we could just take 1 minute to look at the questions and we'll vote. Of course, if we have time, we'll deal with everything.
Also, interestingly, actually, the most popular questions that popped up was actually asked already by Evelyn and Georgia. So it's really interesting to see. It's a very, very clear. Exactly, we are really on the right track now. Especially now, also the last one now on the interoperability and the EIF and then domain specific for emergency services was exactly the same questions we got via Slido. So that's really good. Maybe while voting, just maybe we go a bit backwards now that we can arrive again with Gloria. And one question is, there is this role with the Interoperable Europe Act with the interoperability coordinator with a general role. Do you already have some thoughts how this kind of general coordination role could help then also for the case of emergency management?
I would say that the most important aspect from this perspective is the linkage between the community of practice and the policymakers. They overlap, but if we bring together interoperability and emergency services, one of the main aspects, like I said before, is this lack of cohesiveness. So this means that the community of practice and the policymaker working on interoperability is not necessarily in touch with the one working on emergency services. May seem very easy, but really one of the things that we got as feedback, touching also a little bit on one of the questions that I saw from the stakeholders, so civil protection in Sardinia and the Red Cross in Germany, is that, well, they did not know about the resources that were available to them.
Super, thanks.
Yes.
Ready?
Yes, I think we have the most popular question right now. I hope I see it fine and we see it well on my phone. It's supposed to be for Alessandro, that you stated that you used in your research the assessment tool developed by the Commission. Can you elaborate on your experience using it and feedback?
So, what do you say? Don't kill the messenger. I know they're saying in Italian, not in English. So, we got two different responses. One from the civil protection and the other one from the Red Cross. I would argue that there's already a bias in this because the Red Cross perhaps has less of an overview over the emergency services, even though we did not ask about emergency services in general. We just asked to look at what they were, their information systems, right? The most important element that came up is, yes, the lack of resources. Another one also mentioned that it took them 3 hours. I looked at the quick assessment tool. I would have thought it would have taken them less. I know that it says that it's supposed to be, now I don't want to say something wrong, but maybe 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more. Definitely not 3 hours. So I think there's a little bit of a gap in there. Supposedly, I think it's also a matter of, to elaborate a little bit on this, I think it's again a matter of sometimes even maybe gap in the vocabulary, some mismatch on that. The language aspect was the very important one. Sorry for remembering it only right now. That was a really an important aspect. What else? A little bit of, they found they found it very interesting, relevant, and important to use, but they were a little bit lost in how. Final comment.
Okay, thank you. We go over with our, okay, we have 2 questions battling here, which is why. The next one is, how can blockchain be used for traceability cross-border, in particular to track illegal dumping? And that would be for Gloria. Do you have any idea on how we would do that?
Thank you very much for the question. So interoperability cross-border, actually blockchain systems, as I stated before, are built on an architecture which can actually be interoperable, but the blockchain systems have to have a channel of communication between them. Especially in public blockchain, this is easier to organize, but still, in order to make it interoperable cross-border.
One question, it's also traceable, interoperable and traceable.
And
it's also about traceability cross-border for the waste management, track illegal dumping of
actually traceability could be quite easy through blockchain. That's why we were thinking about this kind of technology to apply, because blockchain through blockchain the traceability is spread throughout all the networks. So if the network is wide, let's say across 4 municipalities in Italy, so we have a blockchain platform where only 4 municipalities apply, then the informations are spread through 4 municipalities. But if we have a blockchain system which connects different nodes also across different countries, then the traceability can actually be applied to a cross-border traceability. So yes, it might be actually the right technology. The only thing to find out is which one is the governance system, which is the most sustainable one to apply.
See, thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
Now, a question for Eric. What insights do you have that indicate the preference on proactive cross-border public services for or by older people? Mm-hmm. This is just, mind you, that this is a very important question for DigiDigit and semantic interoperability and in interoperability in general.
Absolutely. So I think to preface it, the paper really explored more the supplier side so there were older people represented by civil society groups, but the aspect of this proactive cross-border e-service provision came actually from the CTO of Estonia, Kristo Vaher. So he kind of published this policy document called Next Generation Digital Government, and part of this paper was this kind of use case of so this is not related to older people necessarily, but this is just an example. So you are an Estonian woman, you're in Finland, you're with your family, and you start having contractions. So this, the premise of this proactive e-service was you're able to tell Siri, hey Siri, tell me where's the nearest hospital, and this Siri has, now this is a vision paper, so this is not reality, but so there's some interoperability between your phone, the kind of Finnish healthcare system, and your Estonian identity. So you have these kind of pieces of data that is able in the back end, the Siri will tell you, go to this Finnish hospital, they're already waiting for you. You have this interoperability between the healthcare data, so the doctors already know kind of what's going on with your situation. This was this vision. Now, we're very far away from that. That was, like I said, just this vision paper. But I would say, very difficult to achieve on a cross-border level. Internally, I think proactive e-services would be very beneficial for older people in terms of like pension payments. Now, this could be potentially applied on a cross-border level. That's where I see kind of cross-border proactive e-services happening for older people in Estonia and Finland. So, if you are a Finnish older person living in Estonia, the Finnish government has all of this data. They see, okay, you're at a pension age, that money is deposited in your account, there's no application process, right? This is really that convenience level. But I would say in terms of preference, I'm not sure. I don't know if older people have a preference for proactive e-services. What I know from the supply side, especially on a governmental level, is there is momentum to build these cross-border proactive e-services. But I think that there's a big gap, right, that we're talking about between this vision that we have and these realities on the ground. Number one, using Siri is not possible right now for the Estonian government. They tried to have kind of a deal with Apple, and it kind of didn't work. So that kind of the smart voice activation, that's, I think, very far away. But if we were to go to more kind of this low-hanging fruit use cases, I think pension payments would be a really good proactive cross-border e-service that is feasible. Now, from the user side, I can't say from the study that older people have a preference for these proactive e-services. This was more on the supply side that we kind of investigated. But I think at least in the Estonian context, this proactive e-services are not necessarily novel. So right now there's proactive e-services internally for when you have a child. So the kind of payment for childcare, or however that system works, is automatically done as soon as you have the child. And that's like kind of already proactive. Those services are already processed out and mapped out, at least internally. But on a cross-border level, still kind of a far way to go. But yeah, I foresee kind of like pension payments could be a low kind of hanging fruit cross-border e-service use case. But the preference, I cannot say older people prefer that mode compared to, you know, going in person, because a lot of older people do like physically going to receive public services. So there could be kind of some friction in that regard, but the paper was more looking from the supply side, government, private sector, academia, and civil society as well.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Now, for our last question, can I, or? Okay, just one last question. What would be particular elements, components of interoperability for, I think, what it is, emergency management services? It's called emerging, but I think it was a spelling mistake. The person who asked the question. Because if it's emerging tech, then we have to address Gloria and see what's that. And if not, but maybe I can help a little bit because you've already outlined on the interoperability that it would, for the emergency service management services, we would need the framework, and we would would have to think about that. We would have to think about legal interoperability as well. And I'm wondering if you could just maybe dive a little deeper into the components, mostly organizational, because you've already outlined that the technical aspect of interoperability in emergency services is not the most important thing. So maybe let's tell us a little bit about this conundrum of organizational interoperability in that sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Very good questions. I myself am not an expert in emergency services, so but in this, just to scope it in the right way, we will do the consultations, we will encourage this and support, but obviously we will not do it ourselves. One important aspect is definitely how operations are conducted. When I say operations, I mean, for example, search and rescue operations. A disaster happens, civil protection, firefighters, Red Cross are called. They have to coordinate how to go in the field and look for people, put out the fire, and so on. So it is on the organizational side, besides the technologies and so on, there's a matter of how the process goes, how the business process goes into deciding whether we use an helicopter or a Canadair, deciding whether we use drones. Part of the project, and something that is emerging is the use of drones. So that's also something important, and also goes on emerging technologies. What else? Yeah, I think on the organizational side, this is the main aspect. Obviously, then there are other aspects like sub-elements like the communication and so on.
Perfect. Thank you for your answer, and this concludes our panel. Thank you, panelists. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce. Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh yeah. Congratulations. Sorry. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce my colleague Paula Rodriguez-Müller, who is a scientific project officer at the Joint Research Center. She works with Sven. She's also she has a PhD in KU Leuven. Yeah, we've done a lot of things, and a research fellow in KU Leuven, and she's going to be moderating the next panel. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction. So we're going to now move to the second panel of early career researchers. In this case, we have 4 researchers, and I invite you to join the stage, please. Okay, perfect. I was just checking that we were missing one. So
in this case,
yeah. Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, so maybe just a small reminder on the rules. You will have 5 minutes to pitch your studies and your insights, and then we'll have some time for questions of our 2 experts. And then after that, when we have like the 4 researchers that they presented research, we can move to the slide of questions as we just did. So we're going to start first with Eleonora, which is a researcher at Science Po, School of Public Affairs, and a Blue Book trainee at European Commission at DISH specifically. And she's going to present us today a study related to administrative culture, so quantifying administrative culture as mediating factor in digital government transformation. So I leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Should I wait for the other researcher or just move on?
He's just coming, or? Yeah, I think we could start, so we can have some time for questions afterwards.
Okay, perfect. Hello.
So we're full. Perfect.
So, hello everyone. I'm very excited to be here to present some of my research on digital government. Compared to some of the previous presentations, maybe it is to a less technical degree. However, I think it could bring a complementary angle to some of the governance aspects that we spoke about. So I'm looking forward to the final discussion. In fact, my research seeks to address. How do you move on? Okay, these three questions. The first is, what is administrative culture as a variable? As culture in e-government and digital government literature can be quite broad to define, and there's over 200 definitions of culture. So I tried to narrow it down to this particular interpretation and to build a theoretical framework for it. Second question is, how does administrative culture impact digital government transformation, in particular in the context of Estonia and Slovenia? And the third is, which dimensions of administrative culture then can be identified as most relevant for digital government impact. And to give a brief background of the research focus, I took a step back and I looked at the public management or public administration literature, where some researchers identify some sort of technological determinism, where the ICT factors, so the infrastructure maturity, is defined as one of the most important aspects for digital government implementation. And so I'm also looking forward to talk about the technology acceptance model. But at a broader level, my research endeavor was to delve into this institutional side, so to look more at how does administrative culture act as a mediating factor for digital government implementation. In particular, I define administrative culture as the common beliefs and attitudes of public servants and bureaucrats surrounding the role of their organization, but also general attitudes towards the state administration itself. And so we know that if we try to establish a causality, there can be concurrent factors that explain why government-to-government implementation may succeed. And in administrative culture, I identified 4 key dimensions, such as professionalism, bureaucratic culture, normative culture, and the shared attitudes and vision, where professionalism is identified as the adherence to administrative procedures or the ethics code, while normative culture is interpreted as the availability of in-service training. And the study is conducted through a small and comparative case study approach, focusing on qualitative data from semi-structured interviews, text analysis, and documents. So the scope was really to dive in and to understand which dimensions of administrative culture could be most relevant. However, some limitations were the external validity, seeing as the small n analysis provides insights into the relationships among variables, but less on universalization. So this could serve as a foundation for future large n quantitative analysis. But some findings were that a relation between administrative culture and e-government implementation could be identified. However, it was only considered of marginal relevance. In fact, the confounding variables of ICT infrastructure and political will were still very important, especially in the context of Estonia, which, since its post-communist transition and then accession to the EU, it had a strong political will to market itself also as an ICT country. So there are concurrent effects of different variables which could not allow to isolate administrative culture. However, what was interesting was to look at how not all dimensions of administrative culture were equally relevant in their scope. So for Estonia, the less bureaucratic, more open and network type administrative culture was considered to be relevant, and also the importance of the in-service training. Compared to Slovenia, there was a more transversal training availability to all civil servants. And some of the implications of these findings for interoperability are that having identified administrative culture as a potential institutional factor mediating digital government implementation, further research could inform public managers to focus on the organizational layer of the EIF. This is because by focusing on this layer, the administrators could attempt to foster a culture that values shared attitudes and vision that aligns with the EIF principles, that is open, and this also aligns by definition with one of the EIF principles, but also to adopt a more pragmatic culture that seeks to streamline these processes and to reduce administrative burden, which also happens to be in the EIF. So for future implications, what could be kept in mind is that there are different channels through which we could try to address these more abstract questions of how can you change an administrative culture, because it's very difficult when it's deeply rooted. However, there's some evidence that the legal obligation that will come with the Interoperable Europe Act will have an important role to set the direction for the public managers, for the administrators, and also tools that the Interoperable Europe Act allows, such as the Interoperable Europe Academy, the regulatory sandboxes, could be a framework to achieve some of these aspects for interoperability. So fostering an administrative culture that supports interoperability through education, collaboration, research, and policy alignment, for example, through the regulatory sandboxes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very nice research. So now I would like to open the floor maybe for one question per expert. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. A different, completely different topic, but very interesting. I have two quick questions. One is, do you believe the political layer has an impact on that? Because, I mean, to be honest, I've been now in a research field, okay? But I was in the public sector, and I was in a public sector very close to the politician layer, and I have seen that that is one of the most important barrier also to have, like in Estonia, you said that. And in Slovenia, you said that there is this hierarchy structure that has an impact. This is something that I have also experienced in my career. I was very low in the hierarchy, and I couldn't bring ideas or something new because then the upper layer was, well, you know, it's written in the law, no, so why we should do it, okay? So just to elaborate a little bit on these 2 points.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think my presentation was a bit more higher level, general, so hard to come to tangible policy recommendations, but I think it's important to scope them out in the meantime. So to do research on these aspects that we think are not tangible, and which means that we cannot address if we don't research them first. I think what you described about the political will also was one of the findings, that if we compare obviously Estonia we know is sort of an outlier in terms of digital government, but the strong political will that they had since their post-communist reconstruction, so when they left, when the USSR fell and they had to take a new direction. This was some finding that came from interviews with the bureaucrats and public sector managers. They highlighted that there was a strong unified coordination to set the tone for Estonia to be the new ICT country, right? So, and you've been researching there. So this is fundamental, and it also highlights how the legislation can help to set the tone, to set the direction, but there has to be a political will that is broader. In Slovenia, on the other hand, like the digital government, if we look at the e-government benchmark, they're not performing badly. They're still very good. The choice for these 2 countries was because they came from a similar Eastern tradition, and so it was interesting to look at the differences and variations between them, even though they had different levels. But what emerged is that in Slovenia, this hierarchical structure was perceived more from the lower level bureaucrats. So when I interviewed the higher managers, they describe it as no, it's quite agile almost, which was not the case. So definitely more research has to happen there, even maybe in a large scale study. So I would be very, very interested to delve into that. Thank you.
We have time then for another question.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I invite you to also add some questions to our Slido so that we can address them at the end of the panel. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Eleonora, for the interesting research and presentation. I'm very much interested in something you said during the presentation, because it's also related to work we have been doing in Flanders together with Veronique. And it's about also the TRAM you're mentioning, or the technological acceptance model, or readiness to accept new technologies. And what we found here in Flanders is that it's not like personal characteristics or something that are influencing the adoption of, in this case, semantic assets. So we only targeted on data standardization. But I think you can also elaborate this on the multiple layers of interoperability. And what we found in Flanders is that here not the personality traits or like the jobs has an impact on it, but it's like more like the type of organization, like networked organization, like you also mentioned, that has a huge impact on the adoption of semantic assets, on semantic interoperability. So my question is, how can you elaborate on future research you might be doing, and also the link between this administrative culture also on the different levels of interoperability? Because you mentioned that you think there is a strong link with the organizational layer, but I think also on the other layer it might have a strong impact. So I feel like this is very interesting what you were talking about, but I think you can broaden it up to the other layers, and I'm just wondering how you think about it.
This is a very good question. I'm considering doing a PhD, so maybe I'm going to delve into this. Thank you for the idea. But I think I have focused in this connection of the research I did, which was more on digital government, a broader level, to interoperability. Well, interoperability wasn't the part of the research. On the organizational layer, this is because I think it really tackles some barriers that come from these cultural aspects. And I think this was a layer that I saw as most relevant, but administrative culture and the effects it can have on digital government implementation could be seen as transversal. So it could be seen as a pillar and not as a one layer. I think there is also some talk about revising the EIF, maybe. So this is definitely something that could be taken into consideration to look at what are the transversal elements between the layers, and how can you incentivize a certain type of more favorable administrative culture. Maybe this can be through further research, this could be maybe through guidelines, so even at a policy level. So I think what's important is to try and think how to connect the policy and the research. I think this is very important, and it's what we're doing in SEMIC, so it's exciting to be in this conversation.
Thank you. Great, thank you. I think there is going to be more questions, so please add them in the slide, and then we can address them together with Eleonora later on. So now we move to our second panelist, Yves, who is a PhD candidate at the Open University of the Netherlands. And today he is going to present us his research on the application of interoperability to business platforms models for citizen services. Please.
Wow, thank you. What an introduction. Good morning, everybody. I'll stand up, otherwise I feel a little boy here behind that big table. Yeah. I was already tagged as a silver line guy, according to Europeans, so bear with me. Yeah. So I hope this works. Yeah. No, it doesn't work. Is the green button? No?
Yeah, I think we should get into the second presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
So, that's too fast, actually. Yeah, okay, let's keep that. So I'll introduce it in a little bit different way. So I'm doing some research on a new trend for government services. It's applying the business platform model to citizen services. So actually imagine that you're unemployed and you get €1,000 and you can choose the training that you want to get a job as soon as possible. Yeah. And you probably say that's science fiction. No, it isn't. There are cases out there that really work on that one. Or for example, imagine you're disabled. And in any medical condition, it's not that one of a kind, so it's always specialized to your case. So imagine you get a personal budget. And by the way, it's not a new invention. It has been there for a couple of years. But now it's being used in the context of a business platform model. And actually, you can decide via digital marketplace which one of the ecosystems partners you engage with. Again, marketplaces have been around there for quite a long time. The elements underneath it, like a personal budget, have been around it for quite some time. But now it's being used with technology and brought actually into the same level as we all know as personal persons. The Amazons, the Ubers, the convenience that it has. I can start my request anytime on a Sunday afternoon, for example. So I see examples happening all around the world where governments are applying that model and actually launching it to make those services available. Obviously, as I heard from my colleague here, older people, okay, I'm not that old, but okay, yeah. No, it's just good, yeah. So would I be inclined to use that? So I'm also looking at these kind of parameters. But absolutely in case of this research here, I would like to focus on data, because data is an important element to make services truly personal. You as a citizen must be willing to share data with the ecosystem. It can be your CV, it can be your history of education, but if it's a medical case, it could even be some medical data. Obviously, you do not do that with an Amazon because you know these data will be shared with other partners to make money out of that one. So I'm considering here the government as a very important player, and they're kind of the regulator, that's for sure, but also the platform provider. And I make sure there is trust in there that that data is only being used in the context of that transaction. And the ecosystem also makes a pledge that they will not sell that data or use it in another context. Now, I've been doing some research in 4 case organizations, and I'm actually looking at the enablers. So what would enable you to actually strategize such a model, to design it, to build it, and operate it? For today, I'll focus on data only, but I found out in 4 of these cases, if you ask the question, how do you come to the strategy? What is the value that you're looking to achieve for citizens? It becomes awfully quiet. Yeah, not because they haven't thought about it, but simply because it's so new that said, oh, we thought it was a good idea. Oh, the techies did it for us, you know. So I thought it was really worthwhile checking out, okay, and then how do we determine those enablers? And today I found out, well, in those 4 cases, I found out that data is one of the most important enablers in there. Yeah. So let me zoom into that one. So I'm actually proposing this kind of scenario. What I've seen in this case organization is that at best, each of the organization makes standards on their own. You know, we'll talk to the ecosystem. I will make a kind of a data space, if you even can call it that way, for that particular team, for an employment or for medical purposes, whatever. Yeah. So I see that ecosystem being very frustrated. Yeah, but now I have to use this data set. Now I have to use this data model. You know, what are you going to do with it? So fundamentally, there has not been a relationship developed between the government and the stakeholders for actually establishing such an data ecosystem. On the other hand, none of these things have to be invented from scratch. There are a lot of these Oslo data models out there that can be reused. But again, some of these agencies have not put them on their agenda yet. But actually, I think there's a role for the central IT department to come up with a kind of new perspective on interoperability in the context of business platform models. That's kind of the novelty here. Yeah. And if such a common data interoperability layer should be there, it makes it much easier for the citizen to trust the other stakeholders that their data is not abused. Then the partners can actually use that data, and actually you can also enrich it along the way with algorithms to make it really personal. For example, my foot is hurting. Yeah, you do not want the ecosystem to come up with massage on my shoulders, for example. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I don't think there's a relationship there. Yeah. So in the middle, you can position some of these reusable data processing components. I've been trying to have some contacts with central IT departments it's very early days, and yeah, well, there are not enough cases yet. But if you talk to the agencies, yeah, well, the IT department is not there yet, so it's a kind of a dilemma. So again, what I'm researching is what are the enablers? How do you govern such a business platform model? I'm not talking about critical success factors yet because it's too early days in that game. So I'm trying to establish enablers. Strategy is in there, value is in there, but absolutely data. And I'd like to point that out here. If we do not at least think about such an interoperability layer, applying all of the concepts, all of the standards that have been used or modeled somewhere else in this context, it would be a shame, I would say, yeah. It would be a missed opportunity. In other words, let's be positive, there's a lot of room for interoperability to be used in a business platform model. So I'm looking forward to your questions, your observations, and maybe some case research afterwards as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yves. So I invite you now to the expert to ask a question.
So in your opinion, which is in the architecture that you have shown, which is the novelty that you propose with respect, for example, to some concepts like that we discussed, by the way, in previous conference, SEMIC conference, like personal data space or I mean, this concept of data space, that common layer that you have shown before, which are the main components that you see it, and why it is for you a novel with respect to what has been already discussed? Because I see personal data and I see this trust stuff, and then if I understood that the user decide to in which way to share the data, no? And the government has a role in that architecture. So just elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, you're right. I think all of the elements are on the table. A personal data vault, the Oslo data models, you know, all of that. AI algorithms, there's the AI Act. So all of the bits and the pieces are out there. I have never seen them being assembled in the context of this use case. And that's probably the novelty we need to investigate. So how do we bring those personal data spaces, and how do we let AI algorithms work on your personal medical data? How far do you go? It's also a regulation question. It's an ethics question. Again, I think all of the elements are on the table, but have not yet been applied in this particular context. And that's the research we need to do, and actually come to the advice and say, if you want to apply for a business platform models, then this would be the enablers on a data level. You use the data vaults, you use the Oslo data models, you use the interoperability framework to get you going with the ecosystem. Because otherwise, these ecosystem partners are not going to join, and that's the whole thing about the business platform model, the chicken and the egg effect. You know, if you go to a restaurant and there's nobody there, you're not inclined to go in. Yeah? If there's somebody on the other street and they're queuing up, you're inclined to go into queue. Yeah? This is kind of the same. If the ecosystem is not a partner and is not joining you, you will have little offers on your platform. Yeah. So again, I think all of the elements are on the table, but have not been put into the logical order to make this one happen.
Thank you very much. So we can move now to the second question.
Yes, Yves, thank you for your presentation. I'm also, so I'm maybe now talking towards the head with Oslo, because you also mentioned it. So Oslo is the interoperability program in Flanders, and we have created a lot of semantic assets during the years. And my question is, you mentioned it's like, okay, everything is on the table at this moment. We have this, if we have this layer interoperability, how can it enable this interoperability? But my question is then, do you have any recommendations for us as policymakers on how to implement that semantic layer, for example, within this interoperability?
My biggest recommendation is let's explore this further on after this. Yeah? But wait, I've been at 4 case organizations, 2 in the Netherlands, 2 in Flanders. And they're really, really nice cases in Flanders. Yeah. But I'm not going to talk about which one. But if I put these kind of things on the table, say, we trust the techies, you know, they'll do it. And by the way, in a far past, I've been part of the open data team at the Flemish government for 8 years. And exactly the same question and debate. Yeah, well, these nerds there with their data models, we're not going to use them. So I think there's a lot of massaging, inspiration work still to be done for others to be convinced that there is added value in using these models. Yeah. So I think we hopefully can work together on, I'll bring you the cases, you bring these kind of things, because the agencies are not always aware of what is out there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If there's some other questions that you would like to address, I remind you again, you can use our Slido here. And now we can move to our third panelist, Stefan, who is a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Mathematics and Physics at Charles University. And today he will present his research towards data modeling in complex domains.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I would say that the main topic I focus on is data interoperability and data semantics. And today I came here with two use cases or two problems that we try to solve. The first is technical interoperability of open data. So what's the problem? The problem is that there is an EU directive that basically all public institutions in all member states should publish their data as open data. And there are different ways how you can solve this problem. Probably the best what you can do is to force all the institutions to publish them as RDF, because that's nicely interoperable. But you need to have, of course, the ontology against you are publishing. But this is, of course, difficult for many publishers because they still use, for example, XML to their data and etc. So we've decided to help at least with this, and we decided to help them creating documents that will basically describe the structure of the XML documents they are publishing, so it's at least a little bit interoperable with others. And such a document contains basically three parts: the semantics, the structure, and some additional stuff. The semantics is basically what is the data structure about and how it maps to, for example, Czech laws or other conceptual models that are on the internet. Then the specification should contain information about the structure they are describing. So if you, for example, publish data in JSON, there would be a JSON schema with all the description, how to implement it, etc. And to make it more plausible, we also want to include, for example, data samples, if we have them, or some data transformation scripts, example application, and basically anything that can help you either produce data or consume data in non-RDF formats, so JSON, XML, and CSV. And of course, this is a very difficult task to do it by hand because you need to create an HTML document with all the text that describes what you're trying to publish. So we are creating a tool for that will help you with this. And yeah, this is just high-level architecture of our solution. Of course, it's more difficult. There is just this brief free-level architecture that we require you to have a conceptual model of what you want to describe, and we expect you to have it as an ontology. So at the top, we have a semantic government vocabulary, which is basically an ontology of all Czech laws we have, and all the concepts are defined here, but of course, in the context of European Union, we can have, for example, SEMIC core vocabularies. And from that, we want to help user as much as possible to design the different structures, for example, for XML or JSON, because they are already publishing data against those structures, but they don't have the proper description, so we want to help with that. And we need also the middle layer that basically maps the ontologies to the structural model, because in theory this sounds easy, but in practice there are a lot of difficulties. For example, the structure may not be one-to-one to the semantics. So for example, there could be concepts that are that basically merge two concepts from the semantics and etc. And there could be also mistakes or errors in both the structural model or the ontologies. That was also the problem we need to solve somehow. So therefore, we have a middle layer that tries to address these issues. And we created a tool called the Data Spacer, which will basically help you to design the desired structure of your data against the conceptual model. So this is an example how could look like a JSON structure for tourist destination. So you basically design it in this visual editor, and from that we can generate you basically HTML document with all the diagrams, description of individual concepts, some data examples, how to use it, and it's very convenient. It's basically error prone because you are only designing this, and we also have some options to modify the structure if the data are a little bit different than what you expect. So that was the first use case that we were working on, and it's already deployed in Czech Republic for publishing open data specifications. We are still experimenting with it, but it seems that it may work, and so far we have no issues creating new specifications. Then the second use case we are working on, this is still work in progress, is semantic interoperability. So basically in the first case we've just designed the data structures, but now the question is, what about the conceptual models? Because in the first case we just used the ontologies. And in small domains, when you want to design a conceptual model, it's usually not a problem because you design a single conceptual model. Usually it's designed by a single agent, but in complex domains, there are usually multiple conceptual models on different levels of hierarchy. They are managed by different people, and this brings a lot of problems. For example, how you ensure consistency, how you ensure if one conceptual model changes, so how you propagate those changes to another conceptual model, and etc. And the nice example is with DCAT. It's a vocabulary developed by W3C, and it's a vocabulary. They define some concepts and relations between them, but they do not specify cardinalities to be as general as possible. And therefore, in SEMIC, they basically extended DCAT and created DCAT AP, which is a conceptual model that extended with cardinalities, specifies other definitions, and etc. But even this is not suitable for some member states. So for example, here in Czechia, we created DCAT APCZ, which added some another definition to the conceptual model. And this structure needs to be kept consistent. For example, if something changes in DCAT, you want it to automatically propagate to DCAT AP and then to DCAT APCZ. And for example, you want to track important decisions and rationale, what will happen if the decision should be different, for example, and etc. And this is just a brief idea of our work in progress tool that basically you are creating a conceptual model, and the different colors are the different conceptual models. So for example, the yellow one could be the conceptual model that you are reusing from someone else, and you can create an application profile of it, and for example, something change or something add. And similar to the first tool, you can generate from this an HTML documentation with all the specification, all the changes, and some technical artifacts like OWL ontology or specification of specific classes, and etc. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So we are running a bit behind, but maybe we have time for 2 short questions.
Wow, because I have so many questions. Okay, no, I just probably I didn't get the steps between the previous slide and these slides. Okay, so here you show that you have probably complex models. You have to put everything together. Yeah, the application profiles indeed specify some more details and so on. But with the previous slide that you mentioned about technical interoperability, but you mentioned about schemas, so it's more semantic from my perspective. So I just didn't get the step from the previous slide to this slide. Are these two things connected, or they are two different aspects?
Yeah, you are right. They are basically completely different aspects. They are connected only on like the technical aspect, how it's solved. Basically, everything is related to model-driven technologies. So therefore, on most of the levels, the technicalities are the same, but the use cases are completely different.
Okay,
yes.
and also maybe one small comment from me, because we are also, Georgia and myself, we are in the same project, and this afternoon we are organizing also a workshop on this. And I think it's very interesting because we see in Flanders we have also done something very similar. So we have DCAT, DCAT AP, and then we have several application profiles that are specified and make elaborations or on the international, on the core vocabularies. So we have done that kind of extensions, but we are very interested in how we can also make these kind of extensions searchable, discoverable by other member states. So my question is more like, how can we also make use of these extensions you have been making, and also the tooling you have been using? So I'm making notes, the data space. Can we make use of it? Is it open? Can other member states also use it? And how can we collaborate on this? Because it's very interesting that we open up all these member state specific application profiles.
Yeah, the tool is open source, and we plan to publish it for all the idea is that it would be nice to be used by all the member states. And the tool is mainly for the creation of the specifications, so we do not deal yet with the publication and how to make it, for example, fair and etc. But we are also, or in our research group, we are also working on some ontologies that could describe those application profiles in more detail. So that would be also something that the tool could generate. So if you design an application profile, it would be ready to be published, both technically and for humans.
Yes. Okay, very interesting. So I hope we can collaborate later this afternoon on this topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
questions. I think still if you have some questions, I say before you can add it in the Slido. And also maybe in the afternoon, they have some questions also for you on your current work. So I think that's going to be interesting to hear. So now we move to our last panelist. So we have Michiel, a doctoral researcher at the K11 Center for IT and IP Law. And he's going to present her research related to data sharing and data protection in light of semantic interoperability.
Yes, indeed.
So now we can move to the next presentation, please.
Okay. So hello, my name is Michiel. I'm affiliated with KU Leuven and University of Ghent, and also with the Solid Lab Flanders project. I have a legal background, so I hope it doesn't sound too vague, but I will try my best to let you see my point and my PhD research. So I'd like to start with a very concrete and tangible example to see where we are heading to and to see what the problem is, and that is planning a cinema visit. Because if you plan a cinema visit today, you just type in the movie in a search engine and you immediately get all the relevant information, actors, showtime, and so on. And in the past, if you wanted to plan a cinema visit, you had to consult this information from different websites. So what you actually get is an easily searchable, interconnected infrastructure of distributed storage locations. And what you get is actually open dynamic environments when you use semantic interoperability on a large scale. So you get a broader evolution in terms of data sharing, in the sense that open, so there is a genuine reuse of the data, and dynamic on the one hand because it's a collective effort, and on the other hand because you're constantly refining techniques to extract knowledge. And when we look at the GDPR then, and the balance that is struck between protection of data and sharing data, I underlined protection because in the GDPR you see that there is a focus on personal data, sensitive data, so objectively defined categories of data. And when we're talking about data sharing, you see that there is a focus on more syntactic interoperability. So does this actually mean? Initially, preliminary, you could say, okay, the balance that we now have gets affected, because in the GDPR, you have underlying principles of separation. You have to separate and store data separately according to the purpose, while now you have a really interconnected infrastructure. The collective, the broader societal concerns gets more important, and you move from data sharing towards knowledge sharing. So these are like preliminary reflections, findings that you have. But how do we show then that the balance gets affected? Well, on the one hand, I want to do this by showing a historical revolution about how we evolve from a database to the mentioning of a database concept to a data mesh, analyze these technical concepts, see how we evolved into this data space concepts, into the large-scale use of semantic interoperability. And on the other hand, I also want to analyze use cases. And I will use 3 common threads throughout this analysis to do this. Actually, on the one hand, these common threads are problems that have already been pointed out when applying the GDPR in new technological contexts. So on the one hand, they allow me to build upon that research, and on the other hand, they perfectly allow me to distinguish my research and distinguish semantic interoperable data sharing from the current issues. And so by using these common threads, I like to show how the balance gets affected, and eventually also pose or point out normative recommendations. And so my key takeaway would be that we need to start thinking about the broader issues in a legal way of large-scale use of semantic interoperability before we start employing everything to avoid suboptimal legal choices.
Thank you very much, Michiel. So now again, we can move to your questions.
2 questions. One is, what do you mean with knowledge sharing? I mean, yeah, I got it, but just to have your view on that, and if you believe we are in the phase of knowledge sharing instead of data sharing. And the second one is, do you believe we need to create data models taking into account GDPR principles since the design of these models, so that we can tackle since the beginning, privacy by design also in that case as well? Yeah.
Okay, considering the first question, okay, I will start with the second question. Yes, we can use those models. There's already very interesting research about DPV vocabularies there. So, of course, we can use that. And the first question about are we evolving towards knowledge sharing? I like to make the comparison always with if you share data between silos, either in an organization or broader, you're really talking about, or it reminds you of kind of a physical transfer. You're transferring data from one division to another, from one company to another. And once you've transferred it, you need to summarize it, contextualize it, and so on and so on. It's like planning your cinema visit in the past. You need to consult from different websites and then make your decision. And with knowledge sharing, I really see this as computer systems understand the relationships, they read the models, so they immediately get a wider knowledge to make a decision either on I use the example of the cinema visit, but it's not mere data anymore, it's data together with metadata, which is, to me, yeah, I qualify it as knowledge sharing, but to me it's something different that that needs to be tackled when we compare it to, for example, what is tackled in the GDPR now.
Thank you. Yes,
please. Yes, thank you, Michiel, for the presentation. Also very interesting. I have 2 questions, I think. So the one question being, you mentioned like, okay, the semantic interoperability. We also need to take into account legal considerations, and also building further upon Georgia's question is about, so should we then, for example, we in the Flemish Interoperability Program develop our models taking into account these legal considerations, and at what level do you think we should take them? Because like Stefan showed, we have like these several DCAT layers. We have more conceptual models, but also more application profiles, as we call it. So yeah, in my opinion, we should make these conceptual models agnostic of law, because you can really detangle them, I think. It's personal opinion, but happy to discuss. And more on application level, we can then take into account more legal considerations. But I'm just curious to hear your opinion.
I agree, but on the other hand, what I see or what I think is that there is more and more discussion, also broader than law, about ethical use of linking or ethical linking of data. And if you're then starting with the conceptual model, there should already be some principles that maybe are now more like concrete in legislation that go up to the top. I don't know exactly how to translate it, but and that you use before you start, and that not afterwards you see the consequences, and by following these principles or these things, you would think like, okay, shit, now we have the problem afterwards. And a very short, very briefly, an author or a paper that I very much like is, for example, considering application of a few GDPR principles to any computing that you do. And that could, for example, be a super nice start before you start linking everything, that you also reflect these principles, that you have kind of a road book, either legal or ethical. And then, of course, on an application level, you can still make it more concrete.
Yes, very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, we're running out of time. Sorry to interrupt this one. But I think first I would like to thank you all, and also thanking the previous participants that were presented before. I will steal 3 minutes from your coffee break, and sorry for that, but I think it would be great to... Great, okay, perfect. It would be great to hear just a few reflections from you, very briefly in one sentence, more related to the implications of your research and the application of your research. And maybe in one sentence, what would be your recommendation either for practitioners or policymakers in related to interoperability and the studies you are conducting? Just if you can make and share with us some small reflection about that, and maybe Michiel, we can start with you and then we follow the line. Thank you.
Okay. My very short reflection would be think about it before you start. Think about these consequences and balancing data protection and data sharing once you start a project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mine would be to not be afraid of delving into research that seems so abstract, especially when you talk about cultural factors, but that it's very much necessary. And so to start from somewhere, and then also to maybe take it further in a more quantitative, large-scale way compared to my research.
No. I get 2 minutes then, yeah? No, thank you very much. A very interesting perspectives as well. When I look at my research and what I hear a little bit in your research is the fundamentally underlying question: what is the value of all of this? You know, what does it do for a citizen? What does it bring for a government? And actually, what all of these data models, what do they contribute to actually making these applications like cinema tickets and my stuff, you know, working? So I think it's all, and it's also ethical. You know, how far do you want to go with this value? Do you really want to flip it over like the banks and the post are doing? You can never go to a bank anymore these days, certainly not for a basic transaction. So I think there are also some ethical elements to consider into that one. So I have one of the enablers is called political leadership, because how do you make political leadership aware of this, and how do we embrace them to actually bring this to the citizens? I don't think they will win votes by saying I got data interoperability installed, you know, or I got a platform model up and running, yeah. But still you need to be able to translate that into value and actually bring that to the citizens as, you know, we use this technology for your benefit and to bring you more convenience, yeah. So that would be my add-on, yeah.
Thank you.
Any more?
Stefan, would you like to add some final comment or?
I have nothing.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much for that again. Now it's indeed time for coffee break. So I think I invite you, maybe if you have any other questions that were not answered, to discuss with the researchers now this time. So when we return, as Sven mentioned before, we will flip the script. The researchers get to ask the questions to the experts today.
Right, welcome back. I think we can get going. Thanks again for the great morning already. No, really, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was really interesting to see so many different topics. No, really, not only on the classical data modeling and semantic interoperability, which of course we had, but also adding more the applied dimension, the cultural dimension, looking into particular technologies, particular cases, a few countries. I think it was really quite a menu we had already this morning. I hope you were not challenged too much by the questions we had from Georgia and Evelyn. But as promised earlier, we now flip the logic. So now the idea is actually for the afternoon to take the time and actually have a bit more presentations, a couple of them, one presentation, one live demo, and so we'll see how this goes. And then it's also for the early career researchers the opportunity to ask questions. I'm sorry for the session just before the coffee break. We did not go into the questions from the audience. We did it because of time, but also there were relatively few questions, and most of them already were actually brought up when we had the discussion here. So this is why we skipped it, but it doesn't mean that we will get back to questions from the audience. We'll definitely do it also after this panel. So again, the Slido is still out there. There is a room for the early career researchers. Feel free to put in questions, people in the room and also people connecting online. We will get back to questions later on, but of course, first hear more from both Georgia, Evelyn, and then Veronique is joining. I'll explain it in a second. One thing, and this is just if you like to have a very small takeaway from the session physically, I will leave a few things here at the end. One is a Fresh Minds initiative, and this is actually an initiative that Paula started in the JRC, where we try to interconnect early career researchers on digital government, and we try to create a network also connecting it to the work we do at the Joint Research Center. And the work we actually do, we didn't speak about much, but there is a whole block of cards on explaining what we do on digital transformation, on governance, emerging technologies, and what have you. So this is something I'll leave later on the tables, or if we meet each other a bit later today or tomorrow in the conference, just pass by. I'm happy to distribute. But indeed, with this, I would like to go to the next part of the workshop today, and this is actually now going over to the experts as promised. And we start with Giorgia Lodi. She is actually working as the Italian National Research Councillor, CNR, at the Cognitive Science and Technologies Institute. So basically, she has a long history with SEMIC and knows SEMIC's inside out, and we are looking forward to hear a bit more about your research. So please,
thank you. Yeah, indeed, I started in 2013 in SEMIC, so it's like I'm old, you know. That's why, and that's not 50, but you know, more or less. Well, actually, I don't really want to speak about what I do, but I would like to speak about what I learned when I did my career. especially because, as I said before, also during the question session, I did some strange career. I started in research, then I moved in public sector, and then I moved once again in research, much better in research, I would say. So what I would like to bring here is there are some messages for you. You are in the early career research, and there are some messages here in the area of datafication and artificial intelligence, the role of semantic assets. Okay,
should be the big green one.
Ah, the big green one. Okay. No, this one is the point. The big green. Okay. So actually, we live in an area where data is everywhere. Also, before you mentioned many times data, because also when you do a questionnaire, you actually collect data. Okay. And so the volume of this data is rising. Okay, and is increasing, and also the variety of data is increasing. We now are able to manage many types of data, not only structured data, unstructured data, images, videos, and because we have also this social network stuff, and we share a lot of data actually every day. And what I claim is that, and this is, I found it once in a website of UK Office of Statistics, okay, that actually the real value of the data is when you connect data with other data, okay? It's not the single data sets that give you the value, but you can unlock the value of the data when you start connecting data with the other stuff. It's more or less like the roads of a country, you know? The network of the road allows you to arrive to every part, okay? It's the same more or less with the data. So having this in mind, I think that we need to curate a little bit the data, okay? And this is one of the big issues that I observe in what I do, what I did in the public sector, what I do in research as well, okay? In research, we collect mainly data, and sometimes we are not so concentrated on the quality of the data, you know? And I believe that the quality of the data is so much important and is under-evaluated many times, okay? So we just put in some Excel file, some data, and that's it, okay? Then there is the machine, you know, that does that. But the machine should be instructed in a certain way to do that. And I believe that curating data means also leveraging the knowledge of human beings, okay? In the area of artificial intelligence, I do believe humans in the loop is the key to go ahead with the research that we are doing with all these things. And I noticed that in the research I'm doing now and what I have done in the past. Also because in computer science, some of you are not from a computer science field, I am a computer scientist. There is this law that is called Giga law, no? Garbage in, garbage out. So if you have the terrific model there, you know, but if you put as input a garbage data, then the model, the output will not be so nice in general. So we need to curate the data quality. And to do that, what I have done in my career and in my research is that semantics has an important role to guarantee the data quality in a certain way, because we need to structure data, okay? And we need to structure data with a clear semantics so that also not only humans can understand the meaning of the data, but also the machines, okay? So software can understand that, and we can build probably better application and digital services that you mentioned also before. But semantics comes at a high cost, you know? I spent a lot of years in the public sector developing semantic assets for the Italian government, okay? And, people in Italy complaining say, well, yes, there is something, but we do not cover all the knowledge of the public sector. Yes, I know. But you know, creating semantic knowledge and structured data, it's not easy. Also, someone of you mentioned that before in your presentation. So what I'm saying here is that I do believe semantic has still a really important role in 2024. Also in the area of artificial intelligence, also in the area of generative artificial intelligence, okay? And I believe that when we have to do that, and we have to create semantic assets, for example, we may have important elements to take into account. For example, let's reuse as much as possible what is existing at the state of the art. I would say also what exists at the state of the art in modeling solutions. This is something that people don't know, probably, but in the research that I do, we define, for example, a recurrent modeling solution, okay, that then can be specialized in different domains, and so that they can be reused by others, enabling interoperability between also different data models for different domains, for example. And this is not really trivial, okay? Because typically we go for terms, you know, terminology. I like these terms from that standard. No. Semantics is more complex than that, okay? It's not only a terminology, a term that sounds similar to what I would like to express. Secondly, I think that these artificial intelligence tools, I'm not a big fan, I would say, in general, but I would say that they can definitely help us in doing this job now, also in creating semantic assets. I have seen it, I have tried them in some cases, and I see that they can help to speed up at least a little bit the process of that. But then human in the loop is still fundamental from my perspective. And then another important point, at least in my country, I have seen it, openness. Semantic models sometimes are just for the single organization. Yeah, but how can you think that then people can interact or understand your semantics if you keep it all in your organization? Openness, it's a key for reuse and maximize the reuse and the adoption of those models. And then another thing that reminds me also this workshop of this afternoon, I invite you to join us. It's open catalogs, okay? So if we want to maximize the reuse, I think we need to build both probably at the national, but also the European level, something that allows us to share these assets, okay? So that people can understand that others have done that effort and probably take and start not by scratch, but start from something that already exists and try to maximize the reuse. So these are my take-home messages for the students in this specific field. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Georgia. No, really, thanks a lot. We already can appreciate that. And indeed, now I will open to questions from our early career researchers. I'll pass the mic in a second. You can grab it already, Eleonora, if you want to start. But just to say also a few words, because I really like to be at SEMIC, because I did my PhD on semantic engineering and semantic interoperability and automated translation between national and European data models. And I defended my PhD 15 years ago. So I really like to come back to this kind of community, also understanding what is happening in the past. And it was really interesting to hear how you were also making this connection to the quality assurance of data, which is, I think, more important than ever. And indeed, we were publishing with the JRC and our team a report on AI and interoperability last year. And when we were looking into what are the benefits that AI could bring to interoperability in general, a lot of the benefits lie in increasing semantic interoperability. And I think it's really an extremely important topic on a technical and the semantic and knowledge engineering kind of way. But at the same time, what I experienced is you also work together with a lot of different practitioners that have their own vocabulary, and you try to formalize the knowledge they have, you try to extract it. And all this process builds a lot of vocabularies and makes you able to speak to each other. Interoperability between people should also not be neglected here if we really focus sometimes a bit too much maybe on the IT dimension. But I just said a few more words to give you time to think about your questions. But Eleonora, you go first.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very inspiring. I have two questions. The first was on the last point that you mentioned on open catalogs, that it seemed as if you hinted at the fact that we have to build them. I think I was wondering whether you're aware of the European open catalogs on open source and how, if you have any opinion on the work being done there, any suggestions. The second point is about the human in the loop that you mentioned, whether you can also elaborate a bit more on that, any difficulties encountered in achieving this, maybe with an example.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, I know JoinUp. It's a platform where it's also some semantic assets are published actually there. I found it sometimes confusing as a platform. Too many things probably, and probably some more focus on only specific topics would be helpful. Probably some some kind of relationship between all of these could be helpful. For example, just to mention, you may have like a catalog of semantic assets. Then we have data.europa.eu, some data sets that may use that semantic asset, and so a link with that could be a possibility. Also, this open catalog at the European level could be within data.europa.eu, because we are speaking about data, and the model regarding that data, it could be a possibility. So yeah, I know that, and I definitely know that behind JoinUp there are some data models that I wouldn't destroy. Okay, I would like to keep it. For example, in Italy, we built on the same standards to create the national catalog of semantic assets that we have. So yeah, that's the first question. And the second one is human in the loop. Yeah, I think that human in the loop, I see it in two ways. When I speak about structured knowledge, I would say that most of my work is speak with domain experts. They have the knowledge of the data. They know how they collect the data. They know everything behind that data. And that knowledge sometimes is hidden behind their systems, okay? And when you open, for example, that data, they lose that knowledge because they just put something they are used to, but they do not share that knowledge with the rest of the public and the potential user of that data. And this is something that I keep on saying to them. Let's try to know also the methodology that you have applied sometimes count in order to understand the data, especially in the medical sector, for example. In which way you collect the data, it can be replicated in other cases, okay? The same applies to open science, by the way. And this is not, once again, trivial, because I don't see also that tendency in the open science world to open the methodology for reproducibility. Also the data. They don't have this concept of open data, no? And openness, once again, also in that case is not really, I don't see it always there. In some cases, yes, in some other cases, not. The other human in the loop, I would say, if you use this tool now of artificial intelligence, I would say that don't trust them, okay? In the sense that we know the hallucinations they have. And so that's why I think the human in the loop is important. Once again, there is an important knowledge of people there. People must be skilled, okay, obviously. And once again, the competencies, and the skills that we need. But definitely also in that case, keeping the human also in the different phases when you use all these tools all together, I think it's a very valuable step to do. And also, I would say these technologies won't replace humans, okay? This is a discussion also in the recent G7. There was like, artificial intelligence part, we lose the work. No, probably we will change the work, the way in which work, okay? But once again, humans are really important from my perspective to keep in all the phases when we deal with data and data quality and so on. That's my human in the loop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question. So like X-Road is also open source, has an MIT open license. In your experience, what is the incentive for organizations to not use open standards and open licenses? Because for me, it seems it would be kind of just a standard operating procedure, right? But yeah, I'm just curious in your experience, maybe what are some of the incentives? Oh, we got some laughs and.
I have to find the diplomatic answer to this.
Yes.
I believe there are two factors from my point of view. From the data perspective, there is still, from my point of view, the idea that the data is mine.
Yes.
That is not mine.
Ownership,
I mean, probably is of the data subject, GDPR tell us, you know. So personal data is my personal data. It's not the personal data of the public administration. You are the controller, okay? And so I give my data to you, and you have to control and do the stuff according to the legislation. And so I think that the idea is that my data is mine, is still valid. And so for the open license is like, but then the data is reused. Yeah, this is what we want, okay? And sometimes they scare about the reuse by enterprises, unfortunately,
Yes.
and businesses, you know, because they do business with my data. No, yes, we need to grow the economy, you know. Businesses are part of the economy. And so that was one of the barriers that I noticed. The open source and open standards, I believe it's a very ancient issue that also regards the ICT providers of the public sector, for example. Okay, do they really have interest in using open standards, or probably they have an interest to have some lock-in stuff so that they know that next time the public administration is going to them as well. Once again, honestly, also the mechanism, the procurement mechanism that we have, it doesn't help that much. At least in my country, small companies that are typically more open and more they tend to use these technologies because they simply want to do things of high quality. They cannot access to these big tenders, okay? And they typically access as subcontractors of these big providers. And, and there is some story about that, okay? I can also speak about this aspect because I'm also co-founder of a spin-off of CNR, so I have also that view as well. And I believe that is one of the current barrier, I think, to the adoption of open source. Then open source sometimes has an issue that for some tools, I'm not speaking about Linux, okay, but for some tools, the idea of not maintained is there. And so they say, oh, but I need to maintain things over time. So how can I apply this open source solution that doesn't seem to be maintained since years, you know? And this is another cultural, I would say, cultural barrier aspects. In this case, for technical interoperability, for example, yeah.
That was a perfect diplomatic, professional answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
You first, then Yves, and then Georges, and then we start moving slowly also to the second part. But first, please. No.
So you basically touched now upon the topic of GovTech and public and private collaboration for the development of technologies. If you had a magic wand, what would you do to try to solve this, to address this issue and solve this trade-off between perhaps creation and reuse, which they touch upon each other, but I think sometimes they are perceived as a trade-off as well.
Okay, so to tackle this issue between private and public, I don't know. I think I believe it's once again a cultural mindset. Okay, so I probably go back to the presentation that I listened this morning. It's not only for the public sector, but it should be also for the private sector, I would say. And the analysis on that could be interesting. I believe there is a space also to, for companies to invest also in this openness. Okay, because if a public administration is happy to work with you, they will come to you once again, even if you use open source and you don't put a lock-in, okay? But probably they are, and probably the cultural mindset here to change is the way in which we do business, okay? So the business is do the minimum stuff to maximize the profit. We should try to do a better quality stuff and then earn because you do a better quality stuff, okay? But I don't have any solution, actually. I really don't have it. One solution could be to incentivize and promote as much as possible the use of open source, openness within the public sector. We have a law in Italy that says that. But still public administrations, you know, are quite reluctant sometimes to do this. If we, and here there is the other cultural mindset to change in the public sector to have this, because then if they ask openness, then obviously the private sector has to change to adapt to the new requirements, you know. This is the point. The other one was, okay, reuse and creation are together, you know. It's not easy sometimes to reuse already existing semantic assets. I tell you, I mean, it's the objective, I would say. We need to start looking at that. But sometimes we tend, I do carry out this way of work when I do semantic asset. I tend to restart because probably there are sometimes different requirements. Okay, so the point is reuse is not trivial and is not straightforward sometimes because different semantic assets were probably created according to different needs and requirements at the beginning, okay? That probably they don't correspond to your initial requirements. So you have stuff slightly different. That's why I'm saying the ontology design pattern. Ontology design patterns are actually recurrent, they are already existing modeling solutions, okay? For recurrent modeling issues, like I need to model something that changes over time, okay? There is already an ontology design pattern that allows to do that, which is very abstract. Then you apply in your domain, okay? Then you apply in the specific domain according to your requirements. If we all do that, we have a common layer, which is this ontology design pattern. It's a pattern that is common to everybody. And this allows the creation of links, you know, between other existing ontologies or semantic assets and yours, okay? It's more in line with having slightly also different requirements. That's why I'm saying don't go for terminology. Many times, also core vocabularies, I say here, they are built because, I need the date, starting date. Okay, starting date is there written in schema.org. I take schema.org and that's it. But then I forgot that schema.org defines its own start date within the overall framework of schema.org. So it means that it has a specific semantics with a specific domain and a specific range that is not yours, okay? Because you are in a different environment. And so from a semantic perspective, this doesn't work, okay? There is an inconsistency then using some inference engine. So, you know, that's why I'm saying we also have to do a different practice to better create semantic assets while reusing existing ones, okay? Reusing existing ones, it's important. It's the starting point of any methodology to create semantic assets, but then we need to find these methodologies, you know, that allows us to reuse these other existing semantic assets, but taking into account our semantics, okay?
Hello. Can I just take that question one step further?
Yeah.
I mean, we got all these magical assets on the table for years now, and you're talking about reuse, and it's still voluntary. Isn't it time that government starts making this mandatory, at least intra-government, instead of waiting for the miracle to happen someday? Sorry, blunt question maybe?
No, it's a good question. I tell you that in the Italian legislation, it's a soft law in the sense that in the hierarchy of legislation is not the first level of the hierarchy, but the first level of the hierarchy, there is the regulation that says you have to follow specific technical guidelines that are published in our gazette, okay, the official gazette. So it's a kind of soft law because it's derived from the primary one. And in that soft law, there is written if you have to model some data and some of the concepts and the properties, relationship between these concepts are already in the Italian National Catalogue of Semantic Assets, you should reuse them, okay? Directly reuse them, okay? Then, obviously, if you need to add something more, according to your needs and requirements, then you can extend that in order to do that. So we have tried to do that within the legislation. But I see from my country that still this is not perceived as something to go for. There's some administration that simply says, oh, I didn't know that, okay. And so they reinvented the wheel, okay. And so there is a governance, I think, and here comes the governance. And so once again, I invite you to come to our workshop in the afternoon. There is a governance that tries to check as much as possible, well, at the central level, that these things can be better designed, okay? Even because there are not so many public administration doing semantic assets, to be honest. Probably there are some more actives, and so you still have a possible central control that this regulation can be actually enabled and empowered and implemented correctly. But definitely there should be an obligation like that. There is also this obligation for providers of this public administration, okay? And they typically don't know. Yeah, it's also a way, there is also a communication aspect here, also when we speak about semantic assets that we need to curate a little bit more, I would say.
Excellent. Thank you very much for this round. So I think, Georgia, you get another round of applause, and then we actually go to the next step. Thanks a million. Because now we will transit to Evelyn, which is actually working with Digital Flanders, but also at Ghent University. So basically, also again, one of the faces you see around at SEMIC and really knows a lot what's going on. And she actually today will be accompanied by Veronique, who is actually from the Flemish Agency for Domestic Affairs. And you'll actually see now a small demo of what is going on there. And then again, we take the discussion as we just had before. So I give you 1 or 2 seconds to connect to the thing, but maybe if you want to already introduce.
Yes, maybe I can already introduce. So hi again, I'm Evelyn Vrasseroth, and unlike Georgia, I started also my career in research. But then I quickly met Veronique, and I was also, came into touch with a kind of real use case, which was really inspiring, and which made me also think on how can my research have more impact. So I decided to quit research for full time, and I decided to work 50% for the Flemish government. So here I am today, having a combination of both, which I found very interesting. So I started my research on the adoption and governance of interoperability, and I came into contact with Veronique, and she was having a quite challenge for us as the researchers, and she was saying, okay, we have a lot of local municipalities, they are publishing their data, their information, but it's published as PDF. So this is like the main example of the horror that is happening. This was many years ago. So it was an interesting challenge. So what we did, we co-created semantic assets in order to at least get the semantic interoperability between these local municipalities. And what was interesting about this project is that we invited all kinds of stakeholders to participate in this project. So we invited not only these local municipalities, but also the suppliers of software that needs to implement the semantic assets. And this was really a long process of getting all these people together, the stakeholder management. It really took some time to get all the people on board. But we have got some results, which Veronique will show in a minute. But I want to quickly go also into the discussion about what after the co-creation of the semantic assets, and also on the question that was asked earlier, we call it the 50 shades of no, but how can we incentivize private sector also to implement the semantic assets we are developing? Because I don't need to convince anyone in the room of the importance of interoperability semantic assets, but the implementation, the adoption of these data standards is very important, and we are not at the level we would like to be, but we have taken some measures, or at least we studied how we can, or which measures we should take in order to enhance the adoption. And we also made them into practice. At least Veronique did. And her team, of course. I see Aad here also in the room.
Oh, that's not Niels, that's Niels.
I add Niels, but many people work together on this project. So the research that I did mainly consisted of identifying the factors that would enhance adoption of the data standards. And we basically took different measurements of adoption on the several layers of interoperability. So on the legal interoperability layer, for example, we did make an enforcement of these data assets. So I think that's also what Yves was asking, can you just not enforce these data standards? We did, but we think this is not a thing that solves all the issues. There are other things we need to take into account on the other levels, such as the organizational level, make sure that processes are aligned within these local municipalities and so on. Also, the semantic interoperability, we have the semantic assets, and then also on the technical level, the formats that we are using. But before I start going into much more detail about the things we have researched, I want to give the floor to Veronique, who will show some of the results of what we have actually done and accomplished throughout all these years, because we have been doing this for...
Our dream together, I think, started in 2015.
Yeah, okay. So this is...
Yeah, and we had a dream, so that one day, that local governments actually can publish linked data, decisions as linked data, without extra additional effort. That was important. I've heard a few times that it is difficult to create linked data. We were trying to find a way of doing it easily, so that looking into the process and seeing where can we inject the data so that they are most valuable. Also something I've heard, make sure that it's valuable. The value we wanted to achieve was transparency. Obviously, we're democracies, so decisions should be transparent and open. But also easy to reuse information that's authentic. Quality of data, important. If it's authentic data in decisions that are written down, that's qualitative. So that's something we wanted to do. We did a proof of concept together and a research. At that time, 74% of all local governments already had software. That sounds like, ooh, very good, but that also means that we needed to change all of these vendors. Then they weren't interoperable. They closed down everything. What you said, it is really easy to just shut down and say, this is mine, and if you want your data, even if it's legislation, you should ask me and pay me. That's actually what was happening. But it was also clear we couldn't do it without them. If 74% of all local governments already had software to edit their documents, yeah, we should have looked into that, because we couldn't change 74% of all local governments, even with an obligation that would have been really hard to do. So we needed them on board, and we did that not only by obligating it, but also by building example software. So we created solutions, smart solutions in a way, because we were looking at what features doesn't the market give to local governments that they need. And it's mostly in legal complexity that they don't have solutions. We as a government, we support local governments also in their legislation, so that was for us a really important way of getting in there. We give you, for example, templates in really difficult legislation, so that it's easier for you to do, and in a way that it's also interoperable at the same time.
So that was something we built. We made it not only interoperable, but also open source. That's key, because we want to ask the market, please reuse what we have built. That's what we did, and now I'm going to show you in real life. It's live, so it should be online, because else the gemeente Kortenberg will be really mad at us if this is not live. So this is one of our long-time users. Kortenberg is not a big municipality. They use our solution. They even, you can see here, we give them, I'm going to show you a slide because I don't have access to their thing. We give them templates like this, and they just have to fill it in. And afterwards they publish, and it comes into an environment like this. And you can search every publication they have made. For example, the agenda of something that's still to come. You can find it here. You can also see legislation. This is mainly mobility, some kind of events with a D route, for example. That's something you can find here. And then if I go back in time, 2019, that was actually the first big test of what we have built. It was the new local government. It's after the local elections in 2019. They had to install the new gemeenteraad, council, city council. And they did it linked. And really easy. It is difficult for them to make it because they only do this every 6 years. So it's difficult for them. And they did it in a linked way. That means, if I now go to inspect the page, this one. Yeah, and I'm going to find bekrachtiging. That's like, I have written this down because it's ratification of the appointment of local government. You can see here that, for example, René de Becker is appointed as council. So you can see here that it's linked data. It is, we have chosen HTML with RDFA embedded in them because now you can see, if you go over this page, you can see where I'm at the legal front. For me, as I studied law, for me that's also important, that what you see in front and what is in the back, that is the same, and you can check it. This way you can. So we really chose this implementation that because of this. And if I then go to the page source, I'm going to find bekrachting again. And then I can, we also made this dereferenceable. So that means that if I am going, no, I have to go, this is really technical, so I hope I'm not going to make a mistake. I think this is the person or the manatee. Yes, Niels is giving me the heads up. So this means if I go to this page, I can see what it's all about and what other links we can find. So we try to do this all the way. So, all right. And what brings this? In 2019, we managed to harvest more than 8,000 mandates automatically. So the local governments didn't have to report to us again, this are all the people in my council. It was just automatically there. I think this was 32% of all local governments that used this solution. The local government elections are going to be in October here in Belgium. We want to double that number. So we want some about 70–75% of local governments to do this. Should be working because last year we launched this application, Lokaal Beslist. This gathers every decision that local governments publish as linked data. And if you want to see the number at this point, we have almost 3 million of agenda points that we can actually gather because all of our local governments, almost all of our local governments do this neatly, and we can just collect it. And it actually has a lot of information in it because if you can see, this is Ghent, in April. I'm choosing a date a bit before because else I won't find a lot of information. You can see, for example, this one. This is a decision on something, a kerkfabriek, not sure you know this, but this is also local governments. It's churches, actually, churches, also local governments. We fund them in Flanders. And the thing is, even the churches, the pastors, actually, they also publish linked data, but not openly. It is closed, but it's still linked data. So we can link this information to what they are doing. So it's really growing our ecosystem. That's why I wanted to show this one. This is not a really interesting one because everyone was in favor. So you can also see that and who did that. You can even see who voted in favor. I do remember that there was another decision. This is all of the agenda of Ghent of that day. And you see here something on the war on drugs. That's probably a bit more difficult. And then you can actually see that we have a lot of anti-voters. And you can even see that who was in favor, who was not. So this information we can just like Google, we can just search and we can present it here. Next up is probably not only the new elections, but next up is really interesting information like the mobility information you saw earlier, but also information on how much tax you have to pay or how big a grant you can get. It's also information we want to retrieve in this legislation because it's all there. That's the benefit of being a government. We need to be formal. Sometimes that's not a benefit, but in this case, it really is.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I think it really, I really appreciate that you did a demo instead of slides for this one because you really see these things in action and really impressive numbers. So really fantastic. Thanks a million for giving us a bit more insights also in not only the research but also the practical dimension, which is, as I said, truly impressive. So this again, I turn to the audience. I look at you. Questions on any of these, what you just heard? Eric, please, go ahead. Oh, yes, sorry.
Hello, hello. All right. Thank you very much, and I understand that was a lot of hard work over a long period of time, so cheers to you guys. I was just wondering, so I supervise a master's thesis about open data in Hamburg. I'm going to get the connection here. And the premise was that who are the users of this open data? Who's actually viewing this open data? How is it being used? And his premise was it's probably, citizens, of course, journalists, but come to find out it was mainly public sector officials actually who were using this data. And I was just wondering, have you been able to assess kind of who is visualizing this data or seeing this data? Has there been any kind of like user assessment, or is that a bit out of the scope of kind of the practical building of this open data service, if that makes sense?
Yes, I can give a few comments on this, but I think Veronique will also give some comments. So in Flanders, we see that a lot of municipalities indeed have the question, like if we publish open data, who is going to use it and which data sets are of interest, for example, for municipalities to use it. And at the European level, we have the high-value data sets, which are relevant in this topic. But at local municipalities, they feel like we do not know which kind of data is of interest. And I think it's like this question already enforces the circle, then we do not open because we don't know it. We don't. So for me, it's like a non-discussion actually, because I think like what you're also saying, the reuse of the data is more also for the internal affairs. So by opening it up, you can see what the value is, and then you can start making use of it. So first open it, whatever the quality and anything.
It doesn't really matter who's the users if it's there to begin with, right? Then you can build on that.
Yeah, but I will give
the thing is, the big reusers are the local government themselves.
Yeah.
We see that most of the data that in there, another service, another afdeling, department will reuse the same information. At this point, they just type it over in, manually. And the data is there in another department. So opening it up will be interesting even within the local government.
Yeah, and that matches the master student as well. But I think we kind of frame open data as this kind of messianic, I don't know, messiah type of, it's going to save the world. But the users are actually quite different than, citizen activists, for instance. But it's more actually public sector.
But in the end, it will help having effective public services because the data is reusable within the government. So in the end, it will.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Maybe I can. On that sense, have you seen some application related to the increase of quality between the different government bodies? Meaning that I'm working also from the French part of Wallonie, but do you feel that opening, or did you have use cases where a consumer from another department, meaning another community, has increased the quality of another one because he stated that there were some problems, or not? We did, but
we know that local governments look at other local governments to see what they did, and then reuse it. Since we have opened this up, it's easier to do so. There's sometimes a discussion if the quality of all of these decisions as good, but we can see it. We can also see it, and we can also see what is decided upon, and maybe even because we do toezicht. I'm not sure how to say that in English. We monitor the local governments also. So if they do something illegal, we probably see it, and we can see it earlier now. So we can act on that. So the quality will raise any case, and with templates, it will raise also because we see that local governments need these templates to make sure that they have quality decisions.
Another question is sorry if there is. We talked about norms and standards and things like that, but implicitly we think that there is one norm, but there is a version of the norm. So you were talking about the fact that sometimes the people were reluctant to move to a norm. Sometimes they're already using a norm and they are reluctant to the other one. Have you had any experience? Since you had your drink for quite a long way now.
I think this was part of one of the measures we took for the adoption of these data standards, is that indeed some private suppliers of software, they were very reluctant, but what we did is we involved them from the beginning of the process in co-creating the semantic assets. And this really made them a part of the project and also made them really understand what we were trying to do at the end. And this really helped them at being less reluctant and also seeing the benefits for them. Because now, back then, a software supplier could only sell the software or made the software, tailored to one local government, but now it could cater to many more local governments.
Yeah, and what we are doing now is really guard the standard. So we only make changes if we really, really, really have to. And also then we will involve them, but I'm sitting on them and I'm not letting anyone change them unless we have a really, really good reason. So that helps.
Yeah, Eleonora, exactly.
Thank you a lot for the presentation. I wanted to return to the technology acceptance model, just to understand how you use this for an evaluation, where do you see the value in it, and maybe even like some limitations of this model.
So actually my co-author, or the main author actually, for the article has just entered. So indeed we worked on TAM, but we actually also added the R the readiness. So we found it very important. And we did a study a few years ago because we were curious on, okay, we have these local municipalities, but also how ready are they to implement and to adopt these standards? Because it's not only accepting, but also being ready, having the right skills, the necessary organizational structure to indeed come towards the adoption of the standards. And there we saw that we were targeting all kinds of profiles within the local municipalities, but also on the level of Flanders. And we saw that not only this acceptance of the perceived ease of use was important, but also we had the personality traits that we also measured. And there we found that innovativeness of the person was very important to come towards adoption of these data standards. So that was something that we took also into account, and this is also why we introduced at Flanders several workshops, information sessions about these standards, and involved these people into the process. And other than that, also organizational structure was found to be an important factor to influence the adoption or the readiness towards adoption. So that are some points. A comment that we made on this TRAM model as we used it was that we found it very difficult to use because it's about persons, and we had several profiles that we have targeted in the survey, and we found that we have 3 profiles that come into touch with data standards, semantic assets, which are the managers, business analysts, and then more technical profiles. So the conclusion was that we should target all these 3 profiles to come towards an adoption. And we felt like the TRAM model was not focusing on that too much, on like the different profiles you can have within the organization, plus in combination also the organizational structure. So in very short, this was, I hope, somewhat the conclusion of what we have studied back then.
Yeah, thank you. Because I read the paper, I found very interesting how you use this TRAM model. Maybe just a follow-up about the organizational structure you mentioned. Which particular type emerged? Otherwise, I can also read the paper.
Yeah, I don't think we went in that much detail on which organizational structure, but I remember that a networked organization was like, I heard it also this morning, that this was kind of an important dimension of characteristic of an organization that scored well.
Okay, thank you.
Very well. Any more questions from? Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for the nice talk. I'm Sven Lieber from the Royal Library of Belgium, so yet another Belgian governmental entity, more or less. We also talked today a bit about open source and GovTech and so on. So I'm a bit interested, like a bit maybe some behind the scenes or lessons learned that you have over this long period to develop the semantic assets is one thing, but now setting up these tools is a nice thing. I'm a computer scientist by training, so programming such a tool is possible, but maintaining it in the long term, make it usable by the audience, comes with many other challenges. Like, I don't know, building up the knowledge in-house, hiring developers, maintaining it, maybe find subcontractors. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I've heard today that we actually have the 4 or 5 Belgian players in semantic development that are working for us, and that's probably it. So that is difficult. We started small with a small team. I think 4 people, 1 designer, and a handful of people of the government, me and 2 or 3 other people, and then it was okay. But once we started to have success and we started to grow, at this point we have 75 people in the organization to do this, and we needed to educate them then ourselves, because it wasn't there. The market isn't ready to do this, and even the scholars, so the universities and the hogescholen, not sure how that's in English, they're not ready either. So we needed to make sure that they were up to speed with the technology, even with linked data, semantics, how that works, data modeling, and afterwards the development. Niels is one of our development. Maybe something is what we are trying to do now is we have put in a tender, raamovereenkomst, framework contract, probably, yeah, where we try to find more bedrijven, oh my English is going, companies to make sure that they invest. So we are trying to make sure that they invest so we can have more people to work on this ecosystem. And then there's Niels who also wants to say something.
And just grab the mic and then we take maybe one last question if you have any. Cecile, yes, of course. And then we also go to the last part of today's.
I'll try to keep it short.
No, go ahead.
I think to expand on that, one of the things that was different from other assignments we've had is indeed this focus on very open ecosystem, which means we invested in training material. So typically, if new developers come on from any company, whether it's ours or another, we have a month of training, really training in what is semantics, how are we using it, that kind of thing. But also to come back to the topic of open source, we open source everything that we use, which also means it's easier for new companies to enter the space and to enter the community, because we talk more about the developing community. And get familiar with the technologies that we're using and how we implement them. So I think that's something we've been trying to do for a couple of years now, and it seems to be working because more and more players are getting involved in the space, which I think is important because we need to have a really a breadth of players working on this for semantics to work.
Yeah, we actually have found one of the classic vendors of local governments to step into an agreement in the community, a community agreement actually. They wanted a contract with us, they wanted to reuse our editor, and they wanted some kind of insurance that it will work, and we said we're not going to do that. We are going to have a community charter, and that's what it's going to be, and they went along with it. So it was kind of okay. We have managed to get this far, so that's okay. That's a good thing.
Excellent. Maybe Cecile also had a question. If you want to still react on this one, or otherwise?
No, very simple question. Only 2 words actually. What's next? I mean, the wonderful days. What's your next dream, or what's your next realization going to be on this one?
I've written this down here, but I didn't say it.
You prepared for that? Okay.
Yeah. I've written it. So, you're going to do? The interesting data I already mentioned, and real interesting data for all of the citizens. But on a technical level, we're actually looking into data spaces. We're actually sure that we already have a smart data space, but we're trying to make sure that all of the new tech that is in there, that we are trying to merge into ours. Or the way around, something. And then AI, that's also something that we see, and it's not only how can AI help us with semantics and speeding up that process, it's also how can we, with semantic data, help AI and make it more transparent, because that's something we really believe in, that the two go hand in hand. So that's something what we are going to start up. We did it a few POCs already, and Gent did something great with what we did. I built upon that further, and now we are going to make something in production, probably starting end of this year.
Okay, something to look forward to also for SEMIC 2025, so I'm sure you will have something to tell us. Cecile, maybe for last question, and then we do the pop-up popcorn thing just before we break for lunch.
Just maybe I was not there, so maybe I wondered whether you influenced the cursus at the academia to make sure that you have the right people, because it's really a problem in many administrations that they don't find the right people, and then they just let this technical approach down just because, yeah, it comes to your point. Maybe, yeah.
It's a good question. In Flanders, in the Oslo Interoperability program, actually it was co-founded within the university. So we have worked closely together with academia to establish these methodologies to develop the standards. But indeed, also in the curricula, we are seeing that there is more courses being given about linked data, semantics. So it's getting introduced, but it's not like that it is on all the levels of education that it is being taught. So there is still room for improvement, but at least we see that there are a few professors. I think also Professor Pieter Kolpaert is here. They are making that wish come true, that indeed we have more people that we can source and that know of linked data.
What we try to do is we have every year we have students working for us in the holidays, and we try to give them as much information. We let them play with our linked data, with all of our development. And some of them actually take it back to the university to tell them what they've seen with us. So we try to do it that way also from underneath and hope that it will help.
Maybe one last comment, something that we see within the organization is that the skills on linked data and semantics, you can all learn that. But like your mindset towards the open paradigm is way more important, and we see that is something we really look for in people to work with this kind of thing. So
very good, very good. Open-mindedness. So thanks a lot again, also Georgia, Veronique, Evelyn. Thanks a lot. And then we already moved to the closure, which is the last part of today before breaking to lunch, and this is with Reinhard, who will talk you through. Thanks a lot. Over to you.
Okay, we've had a very interesting morning with some very interesting PhD work going on interoperability. For the closing session, we're going to go popcorn style, and I would like to invite the early career researchers back on stage, because it's better to do a distributed conclusion session than give my conclusions myself. So please come back to the stage. The idea is a little bit that you stand at the back, and
I will be.
well, but you can line up a little bit behind the two tables. And then, like a popcorn, you can actually pop towards one of the tables and try to answer. Well, I'll pose a couple of questions, and once you have a good answer in mind, you can step forward and take one of the mics and answer it. No, it's not a race. It's not. There's not a winner.
Yeah.
But so first question I had for you, looking at the research that other fellow researchers presented today, what is the most insightful thing you heard this morning? So what is the best insight you heard from one of your fellow career researchers? Yeah. You can. Once you grab a mic, you can.
All right, I'll start.
You're allowed to speak.
I heard some very interesting connections between the research and the storage. You know, the e-services, I think, the other work as well, the municipalities as well. So I think there was a kind of, how you say that in English, a red wire, you know, a common thread between them. We're kind of all looking from a different angle, but we're kind of all discovering that what brings us together is data and the interoperability to make it all work. So I think I realized that list, it's not only my subject, but it's the others what they are doing as well. Saying, interesting view here. So thank you for bringing us all together.
We try to have a very diverse topics covered to see also how diverse the whole landscape of data interoperability is. So very nice conclusion of your side.
Yeah, maybe just a small follow-up. I think this interoperability space has such high interdisciplinarity, and I think that was really shown today from these cultural, institutional factors to schemas to e-service provision and this one-stop digital marketplace that really actually is a smart living environment scenario. So I think it's that, but it also raises complexity as well, and I think you're seeing that. Complexity shown, but it makes for, I think, more impactful research as well. And it's been a pleasure being here today, so thank you.
One of the possible questions for the next workshop might be, how do you manage that complexity? That was one of the questions we were also asking ourselves during the coffee break. But I won't pose that as a popcorn question to you at the moment. But any other lessons learned, insights you got from your fellow researchers?
Maybe going a bit more specific, for me, the relation between culture and the actual success of digital transformation, like understanding that it's a bit more complicated than one would think. Not that I thought that it was not complicated, but I think there's like many more elements to look at in there, because still seems, I think, that the culture is still a predominant factor, but maybe in a weird way.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to quantify that cultural.
Yes.
Maybe I also found complementary the governance as a red string between the different projects. From a personal interest perspective, I was very interested in the waste management, and for blockchain applications with interoperability and waste management, which I hadn't thought of before. I worked a bit in waste management ideas, but I hadn't even connected that. So very interesting to see also how the research will evolve, and yeah, excited to read about that.
Yes.
Maybe from the very last panel, what I found interesting, so there were a lot of questions raising or going back to chicken and the egg problem. And then the interesting thing in the last panel that was said, like the question was asked like who will use it? And then it's just the public governments that reuse it. Like once you put it out there, the value is created, and then you can start working. And that's, I find, an interesting insight to further reflect upon.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting confrontation here, very interesting topics, a lot of different topics. And something that emerged that I find quite interesting is that we are working towards new technologies and interoperability, but there are still some gaps at the very beginning. Something that emerged is digital literacy. It's the access to broadband in certain territories, which I am also studying in the rural territories. So there is still a lot of work to do, and a lot of investments and a lot of policies to apply. So thank you for your contribution.
That's a very good point. I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I would maybe
go
say
further on to what you said.
Maybe say something similar to what was already said, but I was really surprised how broad the spectrum was, and basically that there is a lot of problems that still needs to be solved, and that's really interesting that it's not just that simple to solve the whole interoperability, but there are a lot of steps.
It's a journey, and well, that links me to my second question. We're actually at a pivotal time at the moment. We've just had the Interoperable Europe Act being published. We have a new commission on our way. So von der Leyen has been confirmed yesterday as the second term as commissioner. We don't know who the other commissioners will be, but there will be a commissioner responsible for DG Digit. And actually tomorrow we have a whole conference related to how we go from research to reality. Yeah. You are the researchers. You have been researching how we should progress. So what would you advise to the new commissioner in charge of data interoperability? What should be in their policy paper once they go to the parliament and defend their new policy and their new plans for the next 5 years? What is the one thing that really should be in there to tackle? Because there are, as you say, a lot of problems.
Maybe I'm biased because that's where I actually focus most of my work on.
Okay.
So that's, I think, and it's already in the Interoperable Europe Act, the GovTech, so the collaboration between public and private organizations for government technology. I think there should be an even more solid and cohesive program on that, because as it is for interoperability, there's so many different factors that come into play on how public and private collaborate, and it is so fundamental for interoperability and for like an ecosystem of services that I think it's one of the main elements to consider.
Thank you. Can I? Yeah, of course.
I think we all know technology is running extremely fast. 18 months ago, nobody knew what ChatGPT was, so it's going incredibly fast, yeah. So, but I think a lot of the building blocks are on the table. So my advice would be start playing Lego, you know, start assembling these into a use case, maybe inspired with what we heard, and pull it through all the way. Because single digital gateway is around the corner and all of these things are around the corner. I think today, we heard use cases of what we can do with all of that. And that would be inspiration of saying, okay, don't start from a blank sheet, continue building on all of the work you have been done, and maybe get some inspiration here or for the next use case to be put into law, reality, whatever, yeah.
Maybe not super concrete or a bit different, but I heard also in the beginning of the morning like that it's difficult to bring all the different stakeholders together. And at like KU Leuven, we frequently talk about, I don't know if somebody knows it, it's called the designing by debate methodology. And this is really that if you want to solve problems that are expanding very fastly, you need designing by debate, which basically means that you need all relevant stakeholders in a consortium to debate it and come to a solution. So I would say this should always be the core thought when you start with recommendations, suggestions, and so on. In theory, of course, but...
Thank you. Any other suggestions for the next commissioner?
Well, as a researcher doing my related work, I've noticed that a lot of countries try to solve different solutions for themselves, and it's really, it's a little bit disappointing that we are not that much coordinated, at least from my point of view, that it seems to be, so maybe improve that. I don't know how exactly, but it would be nicer to have, for example, one tool for the whole European Union and not every country trying to do it by their own way.
You see some multi-country consortia popping up in different digital fields. I haven't seen it yet on data interoperability, but that might be an interesting way forward as well. Or some specific, actually it's more on specific use cases that you have consortia, like a mobility data space and that sort, where interoperability is then part of it. But on the only part of interoperability, not yet, but maybe it's also better to do it use case driven.
Yeah, and I think maybe, you know, there's kind of a trap of like, look to Estonia. Estonia is doing all of these amazing things. It is an outlier, and things aren't perfect. So the X-Road is a legacy system. It's been in operation for 20 years, and there's kind of a lock-in, actually, in that regard. But I do think looking at existing interoperability platforms, especially the governance model of the X-Road is through the Nordic Institute of Interoperable Solutions. Finland, Estonia, the Faroe Islands, and Iceland are all official consortium members, and they do exchange cross-border data. I mentioned that earlier today, but still looking at solutions that are there, that are already out there, and it's not copy and paste type of situations, but even some governance principles that have been around now for 20 years through this X-Road system, I think could still be beneficial. And I think maybe looking even at EU e-delivery, there have been other kind of interoperability cross-border data exchange platforms that exist already, and maybe still not, kind of picking interesting insights from those established use cases, for instance. So just to follow up on that.
Thank you. Any last advice? Yes?
No, just to mention that for sure there's not many. I don't know many consortia, multi-stakeholder or multi-country consortia, but I don't want to do advertising for the projects that I work on, but there are two that are co-funded by the EU. It's funding at 50%, and they are on GovTech. So GovTech Connect and GovTech for All are basically two ways of implementing the Interoperable Europe Act. You can find them on JoinUp, LinkedIn, and so on, and also happy to share more about that. That's, to the best of my knowledge, that's the only projects that I know, yeah.
Maybe to complement, seeing as we have some public administration in the room, there's also the regulatory sandboxes established by the Interoperable Europe Act, which could be an interesting space to have these dialogues among different stakeholders, not just to receive regulatory certainty, but also to connect the relevant authorities between us, one own country, but also across countries. So this is important to keep in mind too.
Thank you. Okay, that's a wrap up. I want to thank again Gloria, Eric, Alessandro, Eleonora, Yves, Stefan, and Michiel for the very interesting presentations you gave this morning with very high-level research that you're doing. It's nice to see early career researchers doing these kinds of things in data interoperability. I want to thank as well Georgia, Evelyn, and Veronique for their expertise and also bringing some very interesting use cases to the table. So let's give them a last applause.